I loved our effort. Our execution offensively was really good. You know, we have some areas to improve upon. Just the effort and how hard they played for each other to block shots, the togetherness at the end of the second, you know, how we stuck up for each other. That's Blues hockey. That's blue-collar hockey.
That's what it's supposed to look like for the St. Louis Blues. 5-2 win on the road last night in New York with Alex and T-Bone. I'm BK. Where has that offense been all year, Alex? Because I enjoyed the hell out of watching that hockey game last night. The Blues put pucks on net relentlessly. They could have scored 8 goals in that game if you didn't have a really impressive performance, honestly, on the other side by Shesterkin. 43 shots on net, the most that the Blues have had in a game since April of last year against the Predators. It's the most shots that they have had in a win since they had 48 against the Sharks in November of 2021, Alex. It's been 3 years since you put this many shots on net in a win. You can go even further back. It's the most shots on goal in a win against a team other than the dreadful San Jose Sharks, or at that point, the tanking Arizona Coyotes, since they had 44 against Edmonton in December of 2019. It's been a minute. This was one hell of an offensive performance by your St. Louis Blues. It looked like a different roster, and it wasn't. It was the same group of guys, and as Jim Montgomery said last night after the game, he didn't have to do a whole lot to create more offense.
Threw players over the boards. I mean, we got some talent. This is a talented roster. We got a lot of guys with really good offensive hockey sense, and if we're committed to checking like we were, the offense is going to come. But we were really connected. You know, our F3 was on the strong side. Our defensemen were very active and really intelligent with our puck management tonight.
I mean, this goes back to when Jim Montgomery's first year with Boston, and they were asking, you know, how he's doing it with such a good group at the Boston Bruins and putting together a historic season. He said, I don't do much. He's like, the guys take care of the room themselves when you got Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci. And he's honestly right. Like, as much as that was Jim Montgomery, and look, I was very impressed by how he was managing the bench. But when you bring a guy that instills confidence into a group, they go out there and they play confidently. And Braden Shen even said that going into the game. Like, look, the offense is on us. We've got 2 guys that have scored 30-plus goals. A lot of these guys have scored 20 goals, and none of us are doing it right now. So they went out there and they performed. So much so that they had 9 high-danger scoring chances in the second period.
My God.
They have had 8 games this season where they have not even scored or had 9 high-danger scoring chances, and they did that in 1 period.
20 in the game, most they've had since the Sharks game early this year. Haven't had more than 16 high-danger chances in any other game so far this year. It legitimately looked like it was a different roster on the ice last night. I can't explain why, but it looks completely different.
At least watching them, BK, it felt like they had a plan in the offensive zone. Like before, when you were watching, it felt like they'd get into the offensive zone, and even Pavel Buchnevich said it. You'd go in, you'd try and generate offense, you'd take a shot, you'd miss, and then you were coming back out of the zone and chasing it. This time, it felt like there was distinguished roles when guys went into the zone. You had the player that went to the front of the net to cause chaos, whether it was Jake Neighbors or Zack Bolduc. Guys would go to the front, but then it was like there was always puck support on one player, because a guy would have the puck along the board, and then there'd be 2 more Blues players that would come over to support him, so that if he lost it, they would regain the puck possession. It just felt like that they weren't missing up opportunities to put the puck on net and cause chaos. After the first period, they did not miss the net once.
Damn.
They had 31 or 21 shot attempts and did not miss the net once.
When was the last time we said that about the Blues?
Not this season.
Like the Ken Hitchcock era.
Yes. The second period, they had 3 shots that missed the net. So, yes, some of this was Jim Montgomery bringing a little bit of a light feeling to that locker room, I would imagine. But it was more so that he instilled some confidence in those players that when you get into the zone, do what you do best. Create the offense, and they were generating it from start.
And it wasn't just words in this scenario. You guys know I'm all about actions, not words, right? People tell you stuff all the time. Show me. Show me what you're feeling. Zack Bolduc, he instilled confidence in him prior to the game. The players talked about it afterwards. He had conversations individually with basically every player on the roster. One of those took place with Zack Bolduc. I'm sure he said all of the right things, right? Montgomery goes up to him, says, hey, I believe in you. I think you're a really good player, talented, blah, blah, blah. That's great. Show me it with my ice time. Well, that's exactly what he did. Last night, Zack Bolduc, second most ice time he's had as a pro. Almost 16 minutes on the ice, 20 total shifts, and he rewards that with 2 goals. 7 shots on net yesterday. 7 of them. 10 total shots directed at the net. The way that you get the best out of players is by showing them your faith, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes that will be rewarded with a game like that. Now, I don't want to get too far out over our skis, because that is one game. It is the game after they fired their head coach and hired a guy that everybody inside of that locker room likes. I think you could see there's a video posted on Twitter via the St. Louis Blues. They showed the inside of the locker room after that win last night. Guys were obviously fired up for Jim Montgomery. It's very clear this is a breath of fresh air. Whether you want to believe that's on Bannister or not, whatever. They're excited about the fact that Jim Montgomery is their head coach right now. What does this look like in 2 weeks? What does this look like in a month? I think those are fair questions to ask, but for at least one night, damn it if that's not what this team was supposed to look like this season.
Well, and if anything, he put a mirror in front of the players and said, this is what you guys look like when you're good. So when you fall out of the spot where you played like that, and even Montgomery said, like, it's not going to be 43 shots on goal every single night, 9 scoring chances in one period. There are going to be some slip-ups and step-backs. But you put a mirror in front of the players and said, this is what you look like when you're great, and now you build off of that. And the funny thing is, I was looking at this last night. You always go to the new coach bump, right? Because you get a coach, the players are going to play well. Like, you should have put so much money. You should have put $1,000 on the Blues on the money line last night, because the new coach comes in, you're going to win that hockey game. I did, man.
Okay.
I did.
Seriously.
Cool. And I said the over, by the way, which cha-ching. Anyway.
Good bet.
If you look at Drew Bannister when he took over, Craig Berube when he took over, Mike Yeo when he took over, Ken Hitchcock when he took over. The Blues have always won that first game, but they've always had a 500 or better winning percentage with that head coach for the remainder of the season. The last time the Blues lost with a new coach was when they brought in Davis Payne.
Well,
sorry, I not to throw Davis Payne under the bus there, but like, yes, it's a new
Davis
coach bump,
Payne.
but I do feel like once you get a coach in that kind of puts the mirror in front of the players and says, this is how good you can be, this is the work ethic that you need to go out there and pull out victories, that's where the team says, okay, we've got some talent here, confidence, and then you go from there.
Yeah, I can't deny everything that we saw last night. I mean, they looked really impressive, and to your point on the new coach bump, it has worked in the long run for the St. Louis Blues when they've made those changes. Now, granted, I think some of those rosters were more talented, but we'll see. Maybe I was just getting the Bannister effect, you know? Maybe I was falling for my boy and what he was doing with the roster. And as we saw last night, I mean, there's no denying Montgomery got to the message clear to them. Hey, we're going to put the puck on net. I was shocked when I looked down and I was like, man, I feel like the Blues shot the puck a lot. Looked down with like 5 minutes ago in the second period, they had like 30 shots. I was just in awe. So there's no denying that he's getting a message through to them. To your guys' point, he's instilling some confidence in Zack Bolduc, who looked awesome last night, who I even said under Bannister at times looked good, even though there weren't shots coming. Maybe that was just a lack of confidence. Like everything that you guys told me about Montgomery yesterday, I cannot deny any of it today because everything looked impressive yesterday.
Even so much, did you see the graphic I sent you from FanDuel Sports?
I know.
He's got a .969 winning percentage as a coach.
You guys were right. We got like the Pat Riley
He never
of the
loses.
NHL. But I am fascinated to know what it looks like in 10 games because we all know the new coach bump, but it is interesting that you do bring up like every new coach that has been brought in over, what was that, like 4 or 5 in a row there? They do finish the year with above 500 points percentage. And if that's the case, okay, now I'm really in on the Montgomery hire, as you guys were telling me about, and that he is the guy that is going to unlock everything, because you could just tell they enjoy playing for Jim Montgomery, and I won't deny that maybe there was some of that wasn't there with Drew Bannister.
Now, there was an interesting quote I thought yesterday from Jake Neighbors after the game, where he was asked about what kind of tweaks the Blues made coming into that one. Because sometimes you'll get it. Dude, they literally had a morning skate. That was it. A morning skate with Jim Montgomery as their head coach. It's not like he's just going to completely overhaul everything that the team is doing. You don't have time to be able to do that. A lot of the time it's just, hey, hockey is an emotional game. It was Bucci that came on with us last week, Alex, and said there's no sport that brought out the jerk in me like hockey did, because it is such an emotion-driven sport. So some of this is just, hey, they got a new guy. There's a bump there because of the emotions of having Jim Montgomery in there. That's the thing that changed things. Well, according to Jake Neighbors, there were actual tactical changes that took place yesterday with Jim Montgomery as well.
Yeah, we made little tweaks in everything, really, in our D zone, one thing in our neutral zone, a couple things in our O zone. So, there were little tweaks that I thought led to more possession of the puck, more sustained O zone, stuff like that. So, but yeah, that stuff was all good.
Real changes. That's interesting. There was also a piece that came out earlier today over on The Athletic. The Boston Bruins beat writer, Fluto, came out with 10 things Blues fans should know about Jim Montgomery, their new head coach. I found a few of these things to be interesting because I think we saw examples of this on the ice last night. One of them, big on analytics. That's man after my heart. He encouraged his shooters, for example, to complete slot line passes to set up their teammates because the data shows how goalies find it harder to stop pucks when they're moving laterally.
I think I saw that.
Yes, you
Saw
did.
a specific example of that
Shen right to Cairo.
last night on the type of play that we haven't seen a whole lot of, frankly, so far this season. Something we discussed yesterday. He prefers shot quality over quantity. Example, Montgomery wants defensemen to hold on to the puck and wait for forwards, preferably two of them, to get inside of the dots. Then the defenseman would have the green light to fire. It's much harder for a goalie to stop a point shot through multiple screens. We see that last night?
I think we saw that last night. Remember,
that led to the
Colton
Bolduc
Parayko
goal.
took a shot. Bolduc swatted
Tipped
it
it
down
down.
out of midair and then said, cool, I'll take this one, and whoop-ah, right into the net.
Very interesting.
He made that
Sound
noise
effect.
when he shot it, too.
Good for him.
Those are the kinds of things that can be changed with the new coach. Moreover, Alex, you saw something while he was on the bench last night that is not a tactical change, but more something that is just a vibes check kind of a thing that stood out to you.
And I know people think that's a joke, but I personally, like in hockey specifically, it's such an emotional sport that you've got to have those vibes checks. And like, there was an instance after Kyrou scored that goal. The first person in Kyrou's ear was Jim Montgomery. Montgomery was patting him on the shoulder. He said something to him, and both he and Kyrou started laughing immediately. Bolduc took that penalty in the second period for the cross-check where he cross-checked the dude like 5 times, and he comes out of the box. He goes to the bench. Montgomery sits right next to him and explains to him, and you could kind of see him signaling like, hey, when you're cross-checking, you cross-check a little bit lower. Step away from that so you don't take that penalty. And then later in the third period, and Holloway referenced this with Curbs and Joey on postgame, in the third period it was 2-2. Holloway was like, yeah, we started to get down on ourselves. There was one camera shot that had Montgomery talking to both Neighbors and Buchnevich, and then they were joking with each other while Thomas is talking with them, while Toropchenko's talking with them. Like, he managed that bench like customer service. Like, he was just walking around.
I don't know what customer service you're going to.
Great customer service. It's incredible. Have you ever done it over the phone? It's phenomenal. He's walking and talking with every single person on that bench when something happens. And that's what they did not have. Like, Berube used to do this.
Yes.
When Berube took over immediately, you saw it. He was always
Especially
in the ear of the
Vladdy.
players. Vladdy, yeah.
Yeah.
You didn't have that. And I'm not trying to shoot at Drew Bannister here, but, like, it just felt like it was back to the bench, and then everybody kind of stood pat. And that's not the case with Montgomery. He did this in Boston, too. So, again, it's vibes checks. I don't know how people feel about those, but just seeing how he's talking and interacting with these guys in the middle of games goes to show you how they're impacted on the ice.
Great suits, by the way. Already.
You just going after Bandy
I know.
suits. Unbelievable.
I mean,
What's
you can
wrong with
notice
the black on
difference.
black,
Fashion
man?
boy over
Johnny
there.
Cash used to pull it off perfectively.
Listen, as somebody who's not
Perfection.
exactly a fashionista, like
Yeah, you
I
wear
wear
plaid a lot.
flannel
You wear
like
plaid a lot.
7 days out of the week. So I'm not exactly one to talk. But my guy Alex could have helped out the previous head coach with the suit game. Like, let's just be honest here.
I think Jim Montgomery had the double Windsor. You guys see that?
He
little-
looked good
that
last
double
time, man.
Windsor?
It was clearly a fitted suit,
I like
too,
the tie.
in New York, bringing it out for the... He knew what he was doing. MSG, he brought it out.
And now we
He
are
looks
bringing
smart.
fashion advice to your radio waves here.
With Alex and
on 101
T-Bone, I'm
ESPN.
BK.
Every
Coming
game
up
we're
in
gonna judge
15
a
minutes,
suit.
we're going to get into some NFL quick hitters. Plenty more from you guys as well. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Questions and answers at the end of this hour. You can check us out on YouTube, as always, at youtube.com/101ESPN STL. The Graveyard Chat is very active already so far today. People are very excited about a Blues
Goody.
win last night.
Probably because they were listening to me on postgame.
Story posted earlier today from Katie Wu about Nolan Arenado and the likelihood that he is traded this offseason. There was one note in particular that stood out to all of us when we were at this story you convinced at this point the Cardinals will be able to find a suitor for him? We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN. So the St. Louis Cardinals have an obvious priority this offseason, which is
better.
to trade Nolan Arenado.
Those don't match.
Could make them better.
Yeah.
Are you
By
sure?
trading, I'm pretty sure they could get better by trading Nolan Arenado.
Defensively,
yeah,
you guys are just
very much in play.
You guys are just going to be
According to a
surprised.
news story that was posted this morning by Katie Wu, the plan to trade Nolan Arenado dates back to the end of the season. So the Cardinals were on board with our plan. They, according to Katie Wu, have had conversations over the last few weeks. Those conversations are expected to escalate as the team arrives at winter meetings a couple of weeks from now. There's also a couple of interesting nuggets from her story. Again, this is all from The Athletic. You should read the whole thing. But she says that the Cardinals had talks with Nolan Arenado. He did not demand a trade or even necessarily request a trade, but was open to the idea of playing elsewhere for a team that is in contention mode for the next few years. That would suggest it's not locked in on any one team, but he's open to the idea of playing for contenders. He is also open to moving positions, which I found to be interesting because if I'm another team, like the number one value that I'm trading for in Nolan Arenado is that you are a borderline or clear Gold Glove candidate at third base. So I'm not sure how much that really opens up the trade market for him.
You're not trading for the offense right now with Nolan Arenado, unless you believe his, swings to the left side of the field are going to help you with your ballpark.
Even then, it's hard to see him like becoming a slugging first baseman all of a sudden. I don't see that as being in his future, but maybe it adds another team, like literally one team that is like, you know what, we kind of like Nolan Arenado, but we don't have an opening at third base. Maybe we use him at first. Maybe the Red Sox, for example, who have this issue where they appear to want to move Devers to first, but he doesn't want to move to Devers, or he doesn't want to move to first. Maybe they figure this out.
That always seems like a recipe for success. The star player doesn't want to move, but you want him to move.
The most important line, in my opinion, in this story was where she said this does not guarantee that Arenado will be traded. The Cardinals' efforts to move the 8-time All-Star will be complicated by his full no trade and also by the money that he is owed. The Cardinals would likely resist eating significant money in a trade, but suitors might resist giving back better talent unless they get him at a discounted rate. She says that the Cardinals do not plan to make this a quote-unquote salary dump. Alex, at this point in time, do you think that it's no doubt about it, the Cardinals will be able to find a suitor to take on Nolan Arenado, and they will, in fact, trade him this offseason?
No. I'm not sold on this, even after reading through this article. And, the fact that he's willing to hear the possibility of getting traded to another team and that it's not only the LA Dodgers should signify some optimism. But because the Cardinals aren't willing to eat a lot of the money, and look, I understand it's Mo speak, it's PR speak to say hey, we're not just going to trade him to get rid of him. We want something that betters our team for the short term. That's PR speak for look, we're just not going to give him up right away.
That's what they should be saying.
They should be saying that, exactly. But then you're going to get teams that are going to be wanting, it's going to get real muddy. I just view this as still a very complicated situation to where there has to be a team that is willing to bring in Nolan Arenado for the money and is willing to give up whatever the Cardinals are asking for, but also willing to take on the roster manipulation that's going to take place to where does Arenado go to third? Do you put him at first? Because it's not
I think he's a third baseman.
I do too, but it's if somebody out there is crazy enough to say, well, let's make him a first baseman, that is going to be one hell of a transition that you're probably going to regret at some point.
Sure, but that doesn't matter for the Cardinals.
No, it doesn't.
Cardinals side of things is just, can we find a suitor for him? And if there's one team that says, you know what, because he's willing to play first base, maybe we up the ante a bit to be able to get him locked into our roster. Or because he's willing to play first base, we have a third baseman that's going to be here for another year. We'll play Arenado at first for a season and then move him back to whatever it ends up being. If it allows you a little bit more flexibility, that's not a bad thing for the Cardinals. I just think there are so many teams right now that appear to be in their winning window that are in search for a third baseman. I think it's happening. Today is the first day. I've been moving further and further towards this side of the ledger. The Yankees, the Red Sox, the Astros, the Phillies, the Dodgers. That's 5 legit contenders with a potential need at the third base position, or at least they appear to be interested in adding a third baseman this offseason that could be in on Nolan Arenado. There are not 5 legit third basemen available this offseason. There's basically 2. Alec Boehm appears to be available via the Phillies. That's why they're involved with this. And Alex Bregman. Maybe Willy Adames, if you want to throw him into the mix, because he's open to moving positions as well. I think he's probably going to end up at short, but let's add him into this mix as well. So you got 3 guys, 5 openings. More chairs than there are dance partners. So I think that the Cardinals will be able to trade him. Where do you fall on this, T-Bone?
Yeah, I'm like you, where I've started to kind of creep more towards the idea of him being traded, though I still am skeptical of them being able to get this done. I would say, right now, I'm 60-40 that it won't happen. But that's a lot closer to where it has been, right? Like, I thought when the offseason started, there was no chance in hell they were trading Nolan Arenado. I think where it's going to get interesting for them is, look, one is, okay, how much money will they be willing to eat when it comes to trading him? Because I think you're going to have to eat some money to get a better asset in return. And also, like, how are you trying to trade him? Because they said, or Cade reported in that piece, it's not just a salary dump. So that means that they're seeking value in return in this deal. Well, how do the Cardinals value him is where my question will lie, right? Because I think when baseball looks at him right now, my thought process is they're looking at him not as a like middle of the order, Gold Glove caliber third baseman. They're looking at him as like a 5-6 hitter in a contending lineup that is a guy that plays Gold Glove-esque defense, but is a guy that's probably more of like Matt Chapman-esque now than what he was. And if that's the case, I wonder if the Cardinals are willing to say, okay, here's what we're willing to take on in that deal of, hey, we understand that's where he is, so we'll take on a prospect or two in return for this? Or are they still saying, no, that guy still is the guy from 2022. That is a guy that is, though he's on a little bit of a decline, we still think that's a guy that can hit in the middle of an order because that's what he did for us. And that's where it's going to be interesting for the Cardinals.
If the Cardinals viewed him as that, they would just keep him. That's why I don't think that they're going to value him as such, is because if they viewed him as being that guy that you're talking about, what he has been previously for the Cardinals, there would be no reason to trade him this offseason.
I mean, if you're going in a retool like they're talking about, you could still convince yourself of trading him that way because you're looking for the at-bats, right? Like,
somewhat.
Because, like, they've said, like, it's not about contending, right? Like, they've said that out loud. So even if it was Arenado of old, I still think they would be exploring a trade for him.
I'm not sure. I think if Nolan Arenado was the player that he was previously and they valued him as being that player still, I think they would be keeping him because he would be a part of... I don't think that at that point they would be going through a retool, frankly. But if we're just operating under this assumption, I think they just keep him around and say, hey, we're not going to eat all this money, so let's just go ahead and like see if he rebounds next year, and then we'll trade him next offseason after he has shown that rebound ability. I don't think they're viewing him as being that kind of a guy. I think they just want to get some kind of value for him. Like, we're not going to spend $20 million on his contracts to get nothing in return. They're not going to do a Mike Leake deal. They're not going to do a Dexter Fowler deal, nor should they. Nolan Arenado, while not being a great player, has value. He is not a negative wins above replacement kind of a guy at this point in his career. Like last year, you look at what he was a 3-win player in Major League Baseball. That's a guy that has value. You should be able to get something in return for him. Not a ton. Maybe it's a lottery ticket type of a prospect. But if I spend none of the money on Nolan Arenado's deal, somebody should be willing to give me something in return. If I pay down a little bit of his contract, I should be able to get a real return for Nolan Arenado moving forward. So, like, I'll be curious to see what they target there. I don't know if it's going to be a prospect, like pitching prospect, position player, whatever. I continue to believe the team that is most interesting to me, even if not necessarily the most likely destination, is Philadelphia. I don't know what the Cardinals are going to do at third base. Maybe it's Gorman. Maybe it's Donovan. Maybe it's T-Bone's favorite whipping boy, Thomas Ajayci. I don't know who it's going to be. But if Alec Boehm is legitimately available this offseason, that is a fascinating potential trade scenario for the Cardinals. We just saw something similar. Now, this was with two young players instead of a veteran versus a young player, but the Royals and Reds just did what is effectively a challenge trade, right? Like, one team needed pitching, the other team needed a leadoff hitter.
But wouldn't that trade cancel out what they're trying to accomplish by moving Arenado? Because they're talking about moving Arenado so that they could get more playing time at the infield for Donovan and Gorman and Sajasi.
They're getting more playing time for young players. They're not specifically stating who that young player is. Alec Boehm's the same age as Brendan Donovan. I'll just have him as my future third baseman. Like, this is a guy that last season hit 280, and for his major league career is a 280 hitter. And he has seasons in which he has 13, 20, and 15 home runs with 97 and 97 RBIs over the last 2 years. I want that guy batting in the middle of my order more than I want Brendan Donovan or Thomas Ajayci or Nolan Gorman hitting in the middle of my order right now. The right-handed bat, which the Cardinals could really use at this point. Like, Alec Boehm makes a ton of sense for the Cardinals, man.
And that's why if I'm the Cardinals...
Not super expensive?
I know that T-Bone is very against trading Helsley with Arenado. I would package those two together to go get Alec Boehm.
See, now, I am typically against putting Helsley with Arenado. This is like this is a bye-bye trade, right? This is, hey, Helsley, if Helsley's going in this deal with Arenado, it's not so much to dump the salary of Arenado. Now, maybe Philly would take on his contract in that case. But it's more of, hey, Helsley and Bohm are more of, hey, we're swapping those two.
And that's the best you're gonna get for
Arenado's
Helsley.
attached to it. Maybe they eat some money on it. There's a prospect or two that come in return. Like, that's a trade that I'm really open to because I do like the prospect of Alec Bohm. I think it's ridiculous Philadelphia thinks they're in the third base market.
I don't understand it.
And it's such a
He's a good
Dombrowski
player.
move. Yeah, I think he's a really good piece. And he fits the Phillies because they've got star power, right? Like, if Alec Bohm comes to St. Louis, he's probably hitting, like fourth in your lineup, fifth in your lineup?
Third.
It's probably a little high up for him as a player. He probably belongs more in where he has been with Philadelphia at times, which is like in that 6-7 spot. But that's a guy that I'm willing to take on if I'm the St. Louis Cardinals because that could be your third baseman of the future while you try to figure out, okay, who are the stars that we try to build around? Alec Bohm's a core piece. Who are the pillars that will be there with him?
This does get a little dicey in terms of the playing time stuff, right? Like, if I'm going to sit here and say you've got to trade Nolan Arenado to get the opportunities for the other young guys, like, now suddenly you do have a little bit of a crunch when it comes to all of your left-handed bats, basically, like Nootbaar, Donovan, Gorman, add in JC here.
But that's where
Alec
you should still
Burleson.
be in the creativity side of things to where when you look at that and you say, okay, well, we just filled a hole that was for one of these younger guys. Now let's look at these younger guys and figure out which one of these are a part of our core. So one of them could go get us another piece that we're missing.
No doubt. Now you look at the pitching side of things. Now you can make your Brady Singer for Jonathan
Yes.
India trade where it's like, hey, do we need Brendan Donovan or Nolan Gorman or
So JC.
Lars Nootbaar long term? Can we trade one of those pieces with a prospect for a real starting pitching option? I don't know who that guy would be that is potentially going to be available this offseason, but there's somebody that will emerge. Maybe it's T-Bone's guy, Pablo Lopez.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know who it's going to be.
Easy.
But
He's my
in the
Chris
scenario
Kreider of
where
baseball.
somebody gets shaken out of the pitching tree, maybe you become a team that's advantageous there because now you've got your third base option long term. He's a clear-cut third baseman, by the way, not Gorman, not Donovan, who are like, can they play there? We're not totally sure long term, but maybe. Bohm is a third baseman through and through. I just think it's a really interesting scenario, man.
While
And
we're
it makes sense for both of those teams.
And while we're talking about this, I just want to, just yank up the emergency brake. Does any of us really believe that the John Mozeliak side of things can pull these moves off?
I'm not sure, but the influence of Chaim Bloom makes me wonder here because Chaim Bloom is a guy that with Tampa Bay, they get super creative. Look at what they did at the deadline this year. Now, he wasn't a part of it, obviously, but at the deadline this year, they made that Christopher Morel for who went in return? They made that
third
trade
baseman
as well.
Paredes.
Paredes, yeah. Isaac Paredes. That is a creative move to just change things up a little bit. And it's very similar to the kind of move that we're talking about here, honestly, where it's like, hey, this isn't working for us. That's not working for you. Let's see if a swap makes sense for either side. It ended up being a disaster for both teams the rest of the year last year with the Cubs and the
Both regretted.
Rays making that deal. But this will be different for the Cardinals.
That was the whole Rays trade deadline, right? They were like, oh, we'll take Carlson, and you guys can have Sean Armstrong, and both teams don't have any player anymore.
Got to risk it for the biscuit.
Anyways, so I don't know if that's the most likely scenario, but the more that we hear about the way that the Cardinals are operating with this Arenado deal, I guess we're on different sides. I think they're getting it done. And now it becomes what are they targeting? What are they trying to get in return for Nolan Arenado? Going to be an interesting few weeks as we get closer and closer to the winter meetings. Again, if you want to check out that full piece by Katie Wu, well worth your time. It's well reported over at The Athletic on Nolan Arenado's future with St. Louis and the likelihood that he is going elsewhere. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Questions and answers in 15 minutes. NFL quick hitters, including my biggest takeaway from last night's game between the Ravens and the Chargers is coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues beat the Rangers last night 5-2. They are off tonight as they travel to take on the New Jersey Devils. We'll have pregame coverage tomorrow night starting at 5 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Garber for Puck Drop at 6. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at Londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. So we had a big game in the NFL last night. Ravens win 30-23 over the Chargers. I was very wrong on this one. Ravens controlled it from start to finish. There was never really a moment in time where I was like, oh, the Chargers are going to be able to win this one. No, Ravens were the better team. My question to you, Alex, did you learn more about the Chargers or the Ravens last night?
I don't really feel like I learned anything about either team. Like, I feel like both of them kind of fell into the spot. If I was to pick a side, though, it would be Baltimore, because the Chargers have a very good defense with Harbaugh. And I'm thinking it's like, man, the Chargers could be one of those dangerous teams in the postseason. And the Ravens just went out there and put up 30 points against them. So, like, the Ravens, even if I don't trust them, they have a really dynamic offense in terms of multi-facet, where you got Andrews, you've got Flowers, you've got Derrick Henry, and, of course, you've got Lamar Jackson. But, yeah, I kind of walked away from that game thinking it's like, yeah, this is where I thought both these teams were, the third and fourth best teams in the AFC.
I felt like we learned more about the Chargers last night and what they lacked than what we know about the Ravens. I think last night was just your typical Ravens game, right? Derrick Henry had a good game. Couple of good plays by Lamar Jackson. Defense was solid. Not spectacular, but solid. I felt like what we learned last night was against the best of the best, the Chargers really still lack any kind of weaponry offensively. We knew that in our heart of hearts, but I think some of us, myself certainly, had convinced ourselves, like, okay, Ladd McConkey coming along. Quentin Johnston having a couple of games. That was terrible from him last night.
Yeah, he was bad last night.
Just a truly embarrassing performance by Quentin Johnston. I think he was targeted 4 times overall, dropped 3 of them overall in that game. Lost me some money on daily fantasy. Wasn't thrilled about that.
It, BK.
If he catches those, I think I would have won like $400 last night. A little frustrating, but whatever.
Someone's
Teach you to gamble.
Yeah.
Right?
Stop gambling.
I felt like we learned more about the Chargers, where they, to me, are clearly in that, like, upper middle class, but not in the same category as Baltimore, Buffalo, Kansas City among the contenders in the AFC.
I still think they're the 4th best team in the AFC, though. And I put them above the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I think there's a tier, though, Blake, where it's
you're with you.
top 3, really top 2, Chiefs and Bills.
And then the Ravens.
And then the Steelers and the Chargers to me. I think it's been stratified at this point.
Yeah, I agree with that. I thought last night, mine was just affirmation of that team. Thank you. I couldn't remember what the word was.
You got it. You just said
confirmation was what I should have gone with.
Yeah.
My safe space. I just tried to see if I could,
sound really
smart.
educated
like I
around
went
us.
to for university.
Don't try to be Bradford, man.
Yeah, I tried.
We all can't be.
It was confirmation for me last night, because I kind of felt that way about the Chargers. To your point, is we kind of knew that they weren't in that second tier or even able to contend with those top tier teams. Last night was confirmation of it, because though I like McConkey, they still need more weapons around Justin Herbert. Defensively, I think they're fine. Like, they're just a good football team. They're not a great football team.
And they weren't supposed to be.
Yeah,
this was supposed to be the year that they take a step forward, because they've got Jim Harbaugh, but a step back in terms of the talent on the roster. Like
I think they're actually ahead of schedule.
Yeah,
totally.
I was going to say, I've learned about the Chargers. They've got an incredible defense. I think their running game now is good, even with Dobbins being hurt, and Justin Herbert's looked good. Now you just need weapons.
You got a coach, you got a quarterback, you got a defensive coordinator. That is the starter pack for how you become a contender. They're just not all the way there yet, that's not a problem. It's year 1, really.
It'd be like the Jets that don't have any of those.
All right, Lamar is still among the favorites to win the MVP. He is second in line right now. The favorite is Josh Allen. He's at plus 150, Alex. That feels right to me. Yep. And then Lamar Jackson at plus 250. After that, there are a few other names that have emerged as like the second-tier contenders in this MVP race. Jared Goff is at 7-1. Patrick Mahomes is at 8-1, and then it falls off of a cliff. There's one name that I did not mention, and that is Saquon Barkley, who is now at 7-1, tied with Jared Goff for the 3rd best odds in the NFL to win the MVP this year. Does he have a real case in your opinion, Alex? Should we be talking about Saquon Barkley in the MVP conversation?
He absolutely has a case. I mean, I would probably have them ranked the way you just went through those, with Josh Allen, Lamar being 2, and then Goff and Saquon together. I mean, the Eagles are 9-2 right now. And I don't think Jalen Hurts has been fine. I don't think Jalen Hurts has been amazing. I think Saquon Barkley is what you're talking about when you're talking about the Philadelphia Eagles. Like, Jalen Hurts has thrown 13 touchdowns this season in 11 games. Saquon Barkley has been the best player on the field, and that's also a team that was without A.J. Brown for a good chunk of their season, without Devontae Smith for a good chunk of their season, and a coach who just, in my opinion, is incompetent when he's at that helm. So, yeah, I would say when it comes to the third best in terms of the MVP, and honestly, depending on how the season goes, I could see Saquon Barkley overtaking the spot held by Lamar Jackson.
Oh, wow.
Because if this team finishes with 11, 12 victories, I'm going to be talking about Saquon Barkley as the main reason why.
I think he's got a case, but he's not going to win it. And I think it's a little ridiculous that it's just kind of written off that way, because he is the identity of the Philadelphia Eagles, right? And if you take him off of that team, I think you see what they were last year, which was a team that they can win some games on the back of Jalen Hurts, but Jalen Hurts, I don't know if he is a difference maker when throwing the ball through the air. Like, I just looked this up. Where do you guys think he ranks in terms of passing yards this season?
Oh, dude, it's got to be low. 20th?
Close. 17th. Yeah. He's 17th in the league in passing yards.
Guess how many quarterbacks have thrown more touchdowns than him?
Oh, gosh, I'm sure it's 10, 15.
Yeah, it's 15. Here are the names that have thrown more touchdowns than Jalen Hurts this season: Derek Carr, Matt Stafford, Bo Nix, Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins, Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield.
Like, right there. Like, that tells you that the success of the Philadelphia Eagles isn't on the back of their quarterback, which is what everybody will tie this MVP award to. It's on the back of their running back in Saquon Barkley. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the reason, like, Derrick Henry's not getting this conversation, because Henry's right there with him in terms of rushing yards, well, it's because Lamar leads the league in passing yards right now. So I think, yeah, there's a legitimate case to be had for Saquon Barkley. I think it's disappointing that the NFL just kind of writes it off as, no, he's not a quarterback. He can't win the award.
So Josh Allen's been really good this year. I think we're grading a little too much on a curve with Josh Allen, though. And what I mean by that is we are giving Josh Allen the benefit of the doubt because he doesn't have the same weapons that he did previously, and almost artificially boosting his case for MVP accordingly, because we saw him with Gabe Davis and we saw him with Stephon Diggs, and now it's like, oh, wow, look, the Bills are still really good. Josh Allen putting up decent, we'll get into the actual numbers, but decent numbers this year, and they're potentially going to get the number 1 seed. Wow, Josh Allen needs to be the MVP. He's 14th in passing yards, 12th in yards per attempt, 6th in passing touchdowns, 3rd in QBR, really good stat for him, 10th in quarterback rating so far this season. And while he has been meaningfully helpful for them on the ground, it's not like he's putting up these bonkers numbers as a rusher this year. Like, Jalen Hurts has been a better runner on the season than Josh Allen has, for example. Lamar Jackson, better runner on the season than Josh Allen. He is a really important piece of what they're doing. I believe he should be in contention for the MVP. I don't think there's any quarterback that has been so good this year, though, the way that we've seen in the past with Patrick Mahomes or with Lamar Jackson, to where we cannot consider Saquon Barkley's case. Saquon should absolutely be in this conversation. In fact, I think he should be in the conversation more than he has been and more than he is based on these current odds. I would have him right there with Josh Allen. Yeah. I see no reason why not.
I would say Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Saquon Barkley are the top 3 that should be in the MVP conversation. And honestly, Jared Goff would be the only other one that puts himself in that conversation down the stretch.
I'd agree with that. That's all I was going to say. I agree with that. That should be those 3. I agree with your take on Josh Allen as being kind of inflated right now in terms of his MVP. Lamar, to me, is the guy that should be the MVP right now. And I still think there's a case for Saquon.
I don't think there's an obvious case for anybody right now. Like, I think
I could make a case for any of these 3 being the MVP.
We got 6 weeks left in the NFL season, and I feel like this is going to be determined down the stretch.
Yeah.
Because nobody has pulled away in my mind. Somebody on the text line makes a really good point. Part of the case against Saquon Barkley right now is the touchdown numbers. So much of that, I think he's fallen at the 1-yard line 8 different times so far this season, and I think it's basically every single one of those times Jalen Hurts has been a touch
because he's got 11 touchdowns.
11 rushing touchdowns on the year. 2nd in the NFL, tied with David Montgomery. Jalen Hurts so far on the season. Saquon has 10. Imagine if instead of 10 touchdowns right now, he had, let's call it 16. Mm-hmm. He'd be leading the NFL in rushing and in rushing touchdowns. He's on pace right now for 2,100 rushing yards and 400 receiving yards. Yeah, those are potential MVP.
And that's why I think it's more in positive light towards Saquon Barkley, because he's accepted that role. Like, you've accepted not being the red zone or the 1 yard line rusher. It's the tush push. And you've accepted that, but you're still putting the team in the position where they can get there.
He's Alex T-Bone on BK. If you guys want to get involved in the show, 314-399-9646 is the Air Cover Service text line to do so. Coming up next, we'll get to some of your texts with questions and answers here on BK and Ferrario. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. By the way, tomorrow we'll do Ask Us Anything. We'll also have our football pick'em. We'll also be joined. Who do we have tomorrow, Alex? On the
Dan
show?
Rosen, NHL.com, who was at the Rangers game yesterday, and he'll give us some insight on Chris Kreider not getting traded.
I was about to say a word that I can't say on the radio. Heck yeah.
Try it, man. Try, man. T-Bone and I got the dump button ready. Go ahead
I
and say
wasn't
it.
paying that close attention. I would have missed the dump button.
I have my finger on the trigger.
So we got a lot going on tomorrow. Ask Us Anything tomorrow.
Mike
Today, though,
McKenna
is
as well.
questions and answers. A very different segment. And Chris Kerber, dude.
Whoa.
What a show.
Whoa.
Wow.
I don't
Easy
even have
over
to
here.
prep tonight. We got it all ready to go.
Yeah, I really won't have to
Tonight.
work tomorrow.
Got best ofs on Thursday and Friday. Whew, what a time to be alive.
Man, it's a great time.
I'll be here working
BK's
hard.
off like the month of December.
I know.
I got a full week off in December.
So do
So
I.
does
So I can't
T-Bone.
really,
Nice.
I
I
can't
got
really
like
take a shot
2
at
days
him.
off in December, so.
Going a week off in December, another week off in January as well. Going
I
on
don't
a
have that.
cruise, going to Mexico. Man, it's a good time to be alive.
T-Bone, you and I will be the
Dude.
real grinders here.
Man, he is loaded.
I know. This guy just making money, having vacation days. What?
That's what happens when you work 3 jobs, brother. All right, from the 314.
brother.
Guys, there was an article in the New York Post about the Yankees potentially being interested in Nolan Arenado and Ryan Helsley if Juan Soto does not re-sign with them. So, do you think that that could be a good landing spot for Arenado? And if so, do they have anything that immediately jumps out to you as being of interest for the Cardinals? I think they've got a couple of pitching prospects that everybody likes. That's probably the direction that I would go if I was the Cardinals. Just throw numbers at the problem.
Who
and
was
hope
it? Wasn't
a
it that
couple
article
homers.
that brought up Jason Dominguez?
I think
Were
that's
the
right,
Yankees
yeah.
their top prospect for the outfield? Like, that would be interesting, but I don't know. The Yankees obviously would be interested in it, but man, like Arenado saying he wants to be on a team that's set up to win for the next few years. And I guess if you have Aaron Judge, you're always in the position to win. But does their roster construction really give you the vibes that they're set up to win a World Series over the next few years?
World Series,
Yankees?
no, but contend, yes.
Yeah, the Yankees view themselves as a World Series contender.
And like,
No,
whether you
the
think-
Yankees do, but do you view that roster? Like, if you're Nolan
Do I,
Arenado,
or does Nolan Arenado?
Does
'Cause I
Nolan
think Nolan
Arenado.
Arenado does.
Yeah.
If you
And
see
the
Aaron
man,
Judge,
their pitching isn't that good. Like, you don't have
Arenado will view them.
depth.
Arenado would view them as a.
And if you're
I mean,
the
they were literally
Yankees-
just in the World Series this year.
And if you're the Yankees, like the Cardinals operate on a budget, right? Like the Cardinals can spend whatever it is, $190 million. The Yankees play checkbook baseball.
Yeah.
Everybody calls the Dodgers that. The Yankees do it too. So
They
like
just
if I'm
do it
Arenado,
poorly.
if I'm Arenado, I'd look at them and go, absolutely, they're a contender. I mean, it would make some sense for them, especially for Helsley, because like I wouldn't count on Luke Weaver being your closer again for next year.
No.
But yeah, no. Helsley makes sense. Arenado could make sense. He'd be the third best hitter in that lineup, I guess. Without Soto, it'd be Judge, Stanton, and then he probably would be third
Jazz
best.
probably would be.
Oh yeah, Jazz.
little
Jazz would be
better.
up there. So like he would hit like fifth in their lineup. So that's the perfect spot probably for him is fifth, kind of the average guy. Now hopefully Stanton's not on base when he hits his single.
Yeah.
But
That's
I
a
could
slow
see
base runners.
I could see where it makes sense. And to BK's point on like they've got pitching prospects, like they've got 5, 6, 7, 8th, 9th, 11th prospects are all pitchers that are in anywhere from AA to low A. So I could see where maybe you target some of those guys and bring them in here and try to work with them in the minor
Good
leagues.
system to target as well. They have
Yeah.
a really good pitching pipeline. They know what they're doing. That's the kind of team that I would be trying to acquire a pitching prospect from. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers from the 618. Have you guys seen enough from Will Levis over the last few weeks to give him a chance next season?
No.
Nope.
Give him a chance at the beginning of the season, and you were bad. No.
Yeah, no, I'm
no.
good.
Go get another quarterback. Go
If
draft
you're
one.
bad enough to be benched in favor of Mason Rudolph at any point during the regular season, you lose your right to be the starting quarterback the following year. I feel like that should be a rule.
Boy, what a shot at Mason Rudolph.
That's a brutal rule. Poor Mason Rudolph. He
Look
gets
at
into the
Steelers.
NFL rules.
They benched their starting quarterback for Mason Rudolph, and
is
where is he
Pickett?
at? He's the backup quarterback in Philly now.
Oh, is he? I had no idea.
I think Will Levis is a long-term backup in the NFL.
I'd agree with that.
And I think he's a perfectly solid
And again,
backup.
that's not a bad thing. That's a great job if you can get it.
Yeah, Drew Lock's made a really nice career out of it. Chase Daniel made a really
Daniel.
nice career out of it, and now he's in
Legend.
the media because of it, making pretty good money, I would imagine, for Fox Sports 1.
Just legend. If I could go back in time, man, and just be like talented enough to be a backup something. Oh,
The two best jobs in sports: backup quarterback, backup goalie on a soccer team. You never see the backup
Especially
goalie on a
backup
soccer team.
goalie for a soccer team that has a good starting goalie.
and hitting
Yeah,
coach for the
like,
Cardinals.
Name city's backup goalie. Go.
Dude,
Thank you.
Come on,
My,
man.
They have a new
my
coach.
point exactly.
Do you have any thoughts on that new coach, by the way? You got 30 seconds.
If you think I have 30 seconds to give you my
I'm
thoughts on
surprised
that.
you gave him 30.
No, I know nothing about the coach. Sure, great hire by Lutz. He went to Sweden, got a guy.
And if he probably talked to Alexander Steen.
I did find it interesting that
St.
Hackworth
Louis
stayed
has
on
quite
staff.
the pipeline, too.
Dude, we're going to be Team Sweden in a couple of years.
Hell yeah.
All right, so
That's
that's
good,
your
though.
St. Louis City
Yeah.
SC talk today.
There's your T-Bone take.
He's T-Bone, that's Alex, I'm BK. Coming up next, did we just witness the breakout game that we'll look back on for Zack Bolduc, or was that a one-off? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Shesterkin gets a piece of it, falls forward, and they score! Bolduc, he's on the board, his first of the year. Zachary Bolduc battles on the near wing. They get it to Parayko. Bolduc, he scores! What a shot!
Could have been, one of the better games I've ever seen him play. Just, not just the goals, but engaged and confident with the puck and making plays. And obviously we need that out of him. He's a goal scorer. Played extremely well tonight, hanging on the pucks and played the right way. So, nice to see him get rewarded.
With Alex and T-Bone on BK, that's what it sounded like last night for Zack Bolduc right here on your home of the Blues 101 ESPN. Braden Shin talking about, hey, that's one of the best games I've ever seen out of Zack Bolduc. The numbers would support it. Couple of goals, 7 shots on goal, 10 shot attempts last night, Alex. Zack Bolduc looked like a confident hockey player. He looked like the prospect that he was billed to be for the St. Louis Blues. Was that a jumping off point or a potential one-off for him? How do you view that from last night, Alex?
That was a jumping off point. Now, the rest is up to Zack Bolduc. Like, this is on him now to take that next step. You grab that position for a game. What do you do with it from here? But I tweeted this last night. Like, as much as we're talking about how great this was, that starts with Jim Montgomery instilling confidence in him. It was the second most ice time Zack Bolduc has played in a game as a pro. And the only other game that he played more in was the 8-1 butt whooping against the Ottawa Senators, which that's just basically sitting your bench for the third period and putting young guys out there. You've never put him in a position where it was a tight hockey game and said, go out there and find a way to win us this game. Because we've seen that. We've talked about it for the last couple of games. They skip over that line for 8 to 10 minutes in the third period if it's tight, because you don't want to put those guys out there and then make a mistake and then lose a hockey game. But
Alex, here's a question. Follow up on that before you move on. What do you think the most ice time we have seen Zack Bolduc play this year in a win against a team not named the San Jose Sharks?
Ooh.
Most ice time
9
win
minutes
for the
and
Blues.
47 seconds.
Oh, well, more than that.
11-15.
11-10.
Yeah.
It was against the New York Islanders, a game that they won. He played 11-10.
And that was the 1-0 overtime win.
Otherwise, it was
really early.
11-30 against San Jose and 14-30 against San Jose as well. That was a butt whooping. But, last night, 15-50 in that game in a win.
And look at the situation that they were in. You enter the third period, which, by the way, second period, Zack Bolduc is just continuing to build confidence. Like, he was everywhere in that second period. He gets the goal. But the third period, you open it up. Braden Shin scores that goal. And as confident as you're feeling about the Blues, who had like 36 shots on goal at that time, it's still a 1-goal lead. And we've seen the Blues cough up more than that over the last couple of weeks. And what's Jim Montgomery do? He keeps continuing to cycle the lines, one after the other. And Bolduc's line gets out there. They generate an offensive zone time, and they score that goal. That is the confidence booster for a young player that says, hey, and I think JR had this in his piece earlier, to where Bolduc was talking with Montgomery at skate yesterday, and Montgomery was like, hey, man, just keep going out there, doing your thing. Go out there. We know you got a shot. Start unleashing that shot. And every single opportunity he had, it was on net.
Have you guys looked at the Blues plus-minus numbers today?
Yeah.
What they're like for
I
the
looked
season,
at it last night.
for the season. Philip Broberg is number 1 on the team. He's a +6.
God,
Wow.
This guy has been out for what, like 10 games?
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, the Blues have done a
Legend.
lot of losing since he's been out, so
that's fair.
that hurts everybody else without hurting him.
Still a legend.
Dylan Holloway and Zack Bolduc are tied for the second best plus-minus on the team at a +4.
Yeah.
Then Jordan Kyrou at a +2. Nobody else is more than it. Everybody else is either even or a negative on the season. So you're four of your youngest players that are considered to be quote-unquote liabilities are positives so far this season. And yet, now Broberg's in a separate category. He was treated accordingly. He was a top 4 defenseman for the Blues. He was playing crazy minutes. He was averaging 19.5 minutes per night. But Holloway, Bolduc, Kyrou, these guys were basically put under glass in any kind of adverse situations. And in the first game with Jim Montgomery behind the bench, he's like, hey, go out there, boys. Let's go play. And Holloway and Bolduc looked awesome last night.
Which, by the way, they were playing with Oskar Sundqvist. And this is no disrespect to Oskar Sundqvist, but, he's not a spring chicken anymore. He's not what he was, where he's, big and he can go down the middle. Like, he's a little slower when you have multiple ACL surgeries. So, that's not a centerman that you're viewing as driving offense. But he doesn't have to when you've got Bolduc and Holloway, and all of that stems from knowing that the coach trusts me. Because we've had these conversations in the past. I've talked with players in the past. You play differently when you know that one little mistake is going to put you on that bench and you're going to be super glued to it for the rest of the game. To where if the player's like, hey, you screwed up. Like, again, the second period where he takes that penalty for the cross-check. That's a rookie mistake to not know when you need to step away from a scrum. Sure. And if a power play goal would have gone in, you probably get depleted there. It doesn't, luckily, but he comes back to the bench, and Montgomery is coaching him, saying, like, hey, man, next time, go a little bit lower than that. Step away after that second cross-check. and then he goes right back out there the next shift. I have no idea what happens with Zack Bolduc, but there was a reason he was drafted 17th overall by the Blues. We've seen that shot and how good it is, and last night was a springboard for Zack Bolduc to say, damn, I could play at the NHL level. That was 7 shots on goal against the New York Rangers that are actually a pretty darn good defensive team. Let's see what I do from here.
And I will say this, now, though I had my questions of going out and hiring a Montgomery and firing a Bannister, the nice thing with this now is now that you've got a head coach that knows there is a long-term commitment to him in a Jim Montgomery for 5 years, which essentially is the Blues basically said, hey, we want you here for the retool and the part when we're ready to contend again. He can throw a Zack Bolduc out there, and if he makes mistakes, he's going to be fine to live with them and have him come over to the bench, to your point, have a conversation with him, and then throw him right back out there. I think the Blues had the formula for just the perfect bad storm to go with Drew Bannister and Zack Bolduc. And I don't necessarily blame I don't necessarily blame Drew Bannister, right? Drew Bannister, first-time NHL head coach. What's he doing when he's here? Well, he knows he needs to win. He knows he's only got a 2-year deal. He knows he needs to kind of cement himself as an NHL head coach, and he's out there to try and get as many wins as possible. So what does that end up happening and leading to? Well, when he's got a young kid in the lineup, he's willing, when he makes a mistake, he's going to pull him right away, right? He's trying to win and get the best lineup out there, because he needs to prove himself to the rest of the NHL and to the St. Louis Blues. And now that you've got Montgomery on a 5-year deal, you don't necessarily have to worry about that. You can throw him out there. You can live with his mistakes. And I thought last night was the game where I thought we saw spurts of this last year. I thought last night was a game from Zack Bolduc where you kind of saw like Perron-esque style game from him, right?
Oh, yeah.
Where it was, got in on the forecheck, won some puck battles, got to the front of the net. You saw the shot as well, and it ends up leading to 2 goals. I don't think he's ever going to be Perron, but can he be Perron-esque? I think he can be, and I thought you saw that last night.
I think he could be Perron. Now, and honestly, he's got a shot to be potentially better than Perron. I mean, he does everything else away from the puck that David Perron was so good at. He's physical. He's willing to get into the middle of the scrum. Frankly, he can get under some guy's skin. He's fast, and he's faster than what David Perron was, because Perron wasn't the quickest skater, but that shot is lethal. And that second goal, I'm glad you said it, T-Bone, because I looked at Grant the moment that happened. I said that was Perron-esque. Because when Parayko took that shot, he deflected it down with his stick, stopped it, and then in a quick motion was able to wrist that shot quick as the goaltender wasn't set. It is a really tough spot for Bannister to be in. So, like, on one hand, I can't blame him, because when you're a coach that doesn't have security, what do? When things are bad, you fall back on your best players, and that's Sundqvist, that's Fox. Those are the guys that you trust in those situations. But I also go back to what Doug Armstrong said when he was hired. You were brought in to develop the younger players. You were brought in to develop the young core. And that's tough when you're an inexperienced coach. But you can't be sitting them for 10 minutes in the third period of a tight hockey game.
And I think that's an easy thing for the front office to say. It's a lot harder when you're in Bannister's shoes, right?
Totally.
And again, like, that was one of the problems we had with Drew Bannister when he was here, was his handling of Bolduc. Like, I'm not even trying to defend the action from Bannister there. Like, hey, I'll concede. I think he probably was wrong in the way he handled Zack Bolduc, and he probably should have been playing in a retool. But I can get how Bannister got there. But it is the nice thing now that you have Montgomery locked in on a 5-year deal as your head coach, and you've basically said, hey, this is the guy that leads us through this retool. Well, he's not got to worry about it. He's an established head coach. He doesn't have to worry about trying to cement his status as an NHL caliber head coach. He's got that, so he can play some of these kids down and live with their mistakes.
And by the way, this is what needs to happen for this team to have any success this year. You've got to untap. McKenna told us this on Friday, BK. You've got to unleash your middle six.
Yep. I also think that they need to be better at special teams. And last night they were.
Yeah, they were.
Now, you go 0 for 3 on the power play, and so people that didn't watch the game will tell me, BK, they were 0 for 3.
That was not Kadarius. Don't, T-Bone.
Tone? No,
that was not Tone, because you should have watched
it's
the
just
game.
sarcasm. I didn't mean anything by it, I promise. That power play was awesome last night. It was firing on all cylinders. They didn't score because they were going up against an excellent goalie, but 9 shots on 3 opportunities. They had 10 shots in their previous 7 games on the power play. That was over 13 minutes of power play opportunities. Again, 9 shots on goal and 3 chances last night on the power play. They were firing at will. Meanwhile, on the PK, they go for 3 for 3. And I found something to be really interesting about the way they're going about this, Alex. One of the changes they had made on the PK under Drew Bannister this year was personnel usage. They weren't using Booch or Thomas on the PK hardly at all. They would occasionally go to them if it was like a bad spot where somebody went to the box because they were the one that committed the penalty, and it's like, okay, hey, Booch, get out there. Hey, Thomas, get out there. but more often than not, those guys weren't a part of it. They both ended up playing significant minutes on the penalty kill last night, Buchnevich and Robert Thomas. We'll see if that is something that continues or if that was a one-night thing. I'm guessing that's going to continue.
Oh, yeah.
That would be my assumption because those guys were on the PK under Craig Berube when Bannister was here previously. So my guess is they will continue to use them in that way. But it looked noticeably better last night on the PK when they were out there. And I've said all along, Pavel Buchnevich, best penalty killer I've ever seen.
He has says
in a
that.
Blues uniform.
Yeah, he has says that.
Looked good last night.
Yeah, I mean, I understood the reasoning when Bannister explained why they weren't using him because, frankly, when you had Matthew Joseph and Radek Faksa and a lot of these guys on the penalty kill that were in your system, you save some of these guys for more opportunities at 5-on-5. You keep them fresh.
And his idea was, we're not going to put them out on the PK. We're going to throw them out there right after the other team had their power play because now we've got an advantage because their best players are off the ice because they were just out there for the power play. We're going to throw our best guys on. Boom, matchup nightmare for the opposition. I understood the explanation behind it, but the penalty kill suffered because they weren't out there.
Well, and that's it. And
it wasn't as good.
And this is kind of the same frustration that T-Bone and I had with the Sonny Gray usage. You were babying him because you didn't want to get him injured, and it's like, well, you're losing the effectiveness. The year that Montgomery was behind the bench, Craig Berube, the guys with the most ice time on the team were Ryan O'Reilly, Pavel Buchnevich, Robert Thomas, and Ivan Barbashev on the penalty kill. Why? Because those are your best penalty killers. And you could sit there and say, well, we want to keep them fresh at 5-on-5, but guess what? 5-on-5 doesn't matter if you're giving up 2 power play goals in a hockey game. So I would envision, depending on what the lineup is going to look like, if Matthew Joseph is in, he'll get some more penalty kill time. But like at the beginning of the season, I think we saw some of Texier on the penalty kill. You saw some of Dylan Holloway on the penalty kill. I don't envision that happening anymore. It's going to be you use the Sundqvist, the Toropchenkos, the Radek Foxes, but then the next shift, especially if it's a critical power or penalty kill situation, you put Robert Thomas and Pavel Buchnevich out there to close it down.
Ryan O'Reilly played a whole hell of a lot of penalty kill minutes while he was here in St. Louis.
And also, by the way, a whole hell of a lot even strength minutes on the ice.
Because he was one of your best players. Yeah. And that's what the money's for, is to make up for the fact that you're playing.
And they condition themselves to be able to play that much.
Yeah. With Alex and T-Bone on BK in 15 minutes, we'll be joined by Jeremy Rutherford, Blues insider for The Athletic. He'll join us to discuss what he saw in the arena last night in Jim Montgomery's debut as the Blues head coach. But coming up next, it's time for Bet It or Forget It. You guys give us a scenario. We'll tell you if we are betting it or forgetting it here at BK and Ferrario. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Bet It or Forget It. You guys give us a scenario. We will tell you if we are betting it or forgetting it here on 101 ESPN. If you missed it earlier today, we talked about Katie Woo's article over in The Athletic about Nolan Arenado. He has made it clear to the Cardinals, according to Katie Woo, he is open to being traded to a contending team, a team that has a chance to win over the next few years. The Cardinals are open to trading him, and those discussions are expected to take place at the winter meetings. Eric Kratz, former Major League catcher, is on foul territory. He just said Nolan Arenado, quote, would be a great fit for a contending team like the Phillies, end quote. Alex, bet it or forget it, the Phillies will trade for Nolan Arenado this offseason.
I'm going to say bet it. If they're interested in moving Alec Boehm, if they're interested in Alex Bregman, then why wouldn't they be searching for a Nolan Arenado? I mean, if the Cardinals are going to be willing to eat some of the money, if they get better pieces in return, that benefits a Phillies team. You get elite at the defensive position, and frankly, you don't need his offense to be great like it was needed for the Cardinals, because you're going to be behind the Bryce Harpers, the Kyle Schwarbers, all these other players. I'm going to bet this one, and I hope the Cardinals are smart enough to try and pull off a deal to where they get Boehm.
If he gets dealt, I'll bet it that it would be Philadelphia, because it feels like a Dombrowski move. If I'm I still think it's ridiculous they're trading Alec Boehm.
Yep,
like
agreed.
I would keep Alec Boehm over Nolan Arenado right now. If I were in the Cardinals' shoes and they were having that conversation and it was just flipped where Philly was like, hey, we're looking to get rid of Arenado, I would hope they would keep Boehm. But I'll bet it because it feels like a Dombrowski move.
Him trading for Helsley and Arenado feels like such a Dombrowski offseason. And he gets to avoid going out there and trade. I do think somebody's going to regret the Alex Bregman contract. So I can see, if you told me just like the starting point is we're out on Alec Boehm, I think that's ridiculous, but okay, you need a third baseman then. And if you tell me my options for third base are to pay $125 million for Willy Adames, $150 million for Alex Bregman, or to have a $75 million or $65 million 3-year contract for Nolan Arenado, I do think I would lean towards the Nolan Arenado side, especially if I already have an offense that's been built up by superstars around him. I get how that makes sense for the Phillies, especially if I can add in Ryan Helsley into the mix. Makes a lot of sense for them. I'm with you as the starting point, though. I think it's crazy that they feel the need to improve from Alec Boehm. That's not the spot that I would look to upgrade. I would be trying to upgrade my outfield.
Exactly. Because, like, I just looked this up because I was curious. I was like, okay, maybe I'm off on, like, Alec Boehm, right? Over the last 2 seasons, which is kind of when we've seen that decline for Nolan Arenado, 4% above league average, Alec Boehm 12% above league average. Like, what world am I the Philadelphia Phillies and going, the one spot we need to upgrade is third base? It's just crazy to me.
I'm betting this, by the way. This would be the team that I would bet on today to trade for Nolan Arenado. Alex, what do you got for us?
Guys, bet it or forget it. The Blues will be active at the trade or in the trade market at some point this season.
Bet it. That's coming, man. They're going to do it. I don't know if it's the right choice, and I will be very curious to see what they target at the deadline. Chris Kreider.
There it was. I knew he'd get there.
But I think they are going to add some kind of a goal-scoring winger prior to the deadline this year. They clearly view themselves as a contender, right or wrong?
Yeah, I'll bet it. I said it when we had the conversation last week of do you or do you not move on from Drew Bannister, and I said if you're going to get Montgomery, then that tells me you're pushing. Whether that's this season or next offseason, at some point the Blues are going to show their cards of being aggressive. I'll bet it. I'll say it probably is this year.
I think it was you and I when we did a show after the Broberg and Holloway contract, and I looked at you and I said, if there was ever a season where the Blues said, you know what, now it's time to us to start turning the throttle the other way, it's because of that move. So now you look at their offseason where they were aggressive for Broberg and Holloway. 22 games into the season, you fire a coach to bring in a new coach. This is all about aggressiveness right now. And I think the aggressiveness is because the team realizes we've got the core. There's no more drafting and developing. Now it's just developing and waiting for the guys that we have in our system. But you know what you do? And Curbs and I had this on postgame a couple of nights ago. You know what you do when you're waiting for young players to step into your system? You get a winning model so that when they step in, they can just be an accent piece. So when Snuggerud and Dvorsky step in, if you've got your number one center, if you've got your goal-scoring wingers, if you've got an offense that's ready to go out there and actually push, those guys step right in. So I'm betting this one. I think at some point, I don't know if it's the trade deadline, I don't know if it's prior to that, at some point they're going to go out there and say, let's go find somebody who could be in our top 6 to score goals.
Guys, bet it or forget it. Jordan Kyrou and Robert Thomas will be point-per-game players this year.
Bet it.
Kyrou, 19 points, 23 games. Robert Thomas, his will be different because he won't play 82. But Robert Thomas right now is at 9 points in 11 games.
Bet it.
I'll bet it just because I'm high on the Blues right now.
Yeah, you are. High on the Blues, high on life.
Montgomery, dude, I'm going to allow myself to ride this wave. And, like, if I get hurt, I get hurt. Whatever. At least we've got a team that has given us some kind of confidence this year.
Whoa.
And that's the St. Louis
Cardinals.
Blues. Dude, Jim Montgomery does make me reevaluate my view of this team. I don't know how much it's going to last. I have no idea. But Alex said earlier, when they make an in-season change, a lot of the time it seems to work out for him, even if not long-term for the rest of that year. So I'll go ahead and say bet it, because that's the one way that this team can really get back on track. They need those two guys to be point-per-game players.
Just to get you more excited, Curbs gave us this nugget last night on pregame. When the Boston Bruins let go of Claude Julien and you moved to his next team,
We have him.
Stanley Cup final. When Bruce Cassidy was let go and went to his next team, Stanley Cup final. There's another former Boston
saying,
Bruins
I'm
head
just
coach
saying.
that was let go. I'm just saying.
Okay. I will bet this. I still don't know how good the Blues will be, but having 2 point-per-game players would be really impressive. And the reason I think, because I've thought Thomas would be that guy this year, the reason I think you'll see Kyrou get there is because, like, I don't even think we've seen his best goal scoring yet this year. And he leads the team at 7. You know he's going to go on a stretch where he gets hot and scores a bunch of goals.
All right, we went long. Got to get to Jeremy Rutherford. He is live up in New York right now, where the Blues are hosting morning skate against the Devils for tomorrow. Tomorrow they play against the New Jersey Devils. So he's at morning skate today. We're going to talk to him about what happened last night in New York, what he made of Jim Montgomery's debut, and what he saw from Zack Bolduc in that 2-goal performance. Jeremy Rutherford, our Blues insider, joins us next year on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here. They Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues win 5-2 over the Rangers in Jim Montgomery's head coaching debut with the St. Louis Blues. They'll be back in action tomorrow night when they visit the New Jersey Devils. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 5 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Kerber for Puck Drop at 6. The Sports Update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at Londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Big night last night for the St. Louis Blues as they get a win in New York. Put like 100 shots on net. Don't check my math on that, but I'm pretty sure that's close to accurate. Had a bunch of shots on the power play. Had Pavel Buchnevich and Robert Thomas help them go 3 for 3 on the penalty kill. Zack Bolduc, 2 goals last night. Just an overall great night for the Blues in their first game under Jim Montgomery. We're going to talk it all over via the Callier and Thompson hotline with Jeremy Rutherford. He is the Blues insider for The Athletic. Has a good piece up today on the 3 takeaways that he had from the game last night. JR, appreciate the time as always, man. What was your number 1 takeaway from Jim Montgomery's debut last night?
Well, I think it was talking to some of the players after the game and them talking about the tweaks they made, the pre-scout they did, and how the Rangers didn't adjust, and so they just took advantage of it, and they came up with 43 shots, a season high. And it's funny that you're talking about 100-some-odd shots because when I was interviewing Braden Shen after the game, I inadvertently said that they had 43 goals, and he said, shots, JR, shots, yeah, not goals. But it was a great night offensively for that team, as you guys know. And, it's a big question. Can they sustain it? Do they have the personnel here? I'll have a piece up at The Athletic probably tomorrow talking about the offense. And a lot of these players really felt like there's good offensive players in this locker room who can show more than they have this season. And I'll be interested to see if the changes that Jim Montgomery makes, tweaks to the system, can lead to this. I mean, you're not going to get 5 every night, but we've been wondering where the offense is, and maybe there is a little more there with this roster.
And JR, with Pavel Buchnevich having some pretty strong words after that loss to the New York Islanders, talking about how they work only on defense and they need to figure out the offense, and they just get into the zone and it feels like they don't have a plan. Can one game, one practice from a head coach really make that much of a difference? Or was that an emphasis from the players to kind of get their offense going?
Yeah, I got the impression just listening to the players yesterday, even though they didn't say it the past couple months, that they probably just felt a little stifled. And so, your question about the one game, can it change it? 20 years covering the team here, I referenced that just to show some context here. One game has never changed anything, whatever the topic is. A player, a power play, one game has never been a big enough sample size. So we're definitely going to have to see it. But I think the biggest thing is that the Blues believe that Jim Montgomery can come in and make some changes that are going to help them. And we also have the history of seeing players like Buchnevich, Kyrou Thomas under Jim Montgomery. Granted, he wasn't the head coach, but he was specifically in charge of the forwards. And that's what they've been saying for the last 24 hours, is that he brought out the best in them. So I think it is possible.
We're talking to Jeremy Rutherford here on 101 ESPN. Jer, another tweak that he made last night was on the penalty kill. We saw more usage for both Robert Thomas and Pavel Buchnevich. Was that circumstantial? Do you expect that to be something that continues moving forward? What did you make of that choice by Jim Montgomery last night? I almost said Drew Bannister.
Yeah, I did see that, and I talked to Shen about it after the game because he's a guy who was tied with Radek Faksa for most penalty ice time per game, a minute 30 the season, this entire season. And so in talking to Shen, he said, I don't know if I'd read too much into it. He goes, one thing I do know is that Jim Montgomery's going to use a lot of guys. So it could be a situation where, last night we saw some different guys and he's just kind of getting a feel for things. Jim Montgomery did say that a few times. I'm going to dig in and look at a bunch of different things, but I do think that we could see those two more and maybe a guy like Braden Shen less. And perhaps that helps Shen with his overall game if he's not so much out there on the PK.
So, Jared, how about Zack Bolduc? Because, it's been a weird season in the sense of he's getting skipped over for multiple shifts in the third period. You're only seeing maybe one shot on goal. And then last night, one practice with Jim Montgomery, he gets 7 shots on goal and 10 shot attempts and plays the second most minutes that he's ever played in the NHL.
Yeah, I think that Zack Bolduc is going to be a good to really good player in this league for quite a long time. I really do. I think last night was a sign. You can look at last night's game and say that this is the way that he can play. That's why he was a first-round pick. I will say this. I think we got to have some context to this. I heard T-Bone mention it in the last segment. You guys talked about it, is that it's somewhat different circumstances in terms of what position Drew Bannister was in and what position Jim Montgomery's in. Drew Bannister needs to win, but at the same time, he's got to develop these guys. If he doesn't win, guess what happens? We saw what happens. Mm-hmm. And Jim Montgomery's got a 5-year deal to come in and put confidence in these guys. So I don't want to take away anything that Jim Montgomery did last night. It was great. Like, I talked to Bolduc after the game, and he said, the talk before, after the morning skate, the conversation on the bench, all these things are going to be good for Zack Bolduc. I would just say that, hey, it's one game. Let's see if he can sustain this. And I do think we need to keep in mind the different circumstances with the coaches.
Do you think they'll have the same or a different parade route this year, JR?
I think it's going to go down, Arsenal.
Okay.
It's going to go down Arsenal Street, yeah.
That'd be fun.
There's going to be a lot of potholes on Arsenal if you're doing that, so just be ready for the bumpy ride.
All the way to Clayton this time around? Maybe just end it at O.B. Clark's?
I don't know. Well, you got to end it at O.B. Clark's,
That feels like the right way to go, right?
See? Got to end it at O.B. Clark's.
I respect that. In all seriousness, JR, I loved what we saw out of that Holloway-Bolduc line last night. I know Bolduc's going to get all of the praise today, and he should. 7 shots on goal, 2 goals. He was great. I thought Dylan Holloway was really noticeable last night as well. What have you made of what we've seen so far this year from Dylan Holloway in his first season with the Blues?
Yeah, just as impressive last night. You're right. Bolduc, got the headlines because people have been waiting for that breakout game, and he had it. Holloway has had a few good games, but, I like what I saw. And then, don't forget he had a big hit, and Jim Montgomery talked about that after the game too, in response to what was going on out there with all the brouhaha. I think Holloway, what we have to keep in mind is that he comes in, there's a lot of headlines with the offer sheet. He's fast. He's, pretty physical. But at this point in time, he's moving around a lot, right? So he's left wing, he's right wing, he's center, he's first line, he's third line. I think when we get to a point where this Blues team is ready to compete, he's still going to be at a really young age, and he's still going to be a guy that even if he's on that third line, he's going to be a really solid player for you. So when I look at Holloway, I do look at the here and now, but I also look at what type of piece he's going to be, like I said, at a good age for this team in the next couple of years when they're ready to compete.
JR, I remember a conversation you and I had either last year or 2 years ago talking about this team and kind of the identity. And you talked a lot about how even post whistles, there's never really a team camaraderie feel that if somebody's in the middle of something, you see a lot of guys skate away. Last night, Montgomery referenced it with you guys post-game media, but then also in the locker room that the Blues tweeted out of look, if there was 5 guys, we had 6. 6 guys, we had 7. Are we starting to see a little bit of a come-together moment for this group of players?
Yeah, and I made sure to make a point in my story today when team togetherness. I made sure to make a point that we saw that, a few times with this team under Drew Bannister. I think we even made some comments like, hey, it looks like they're playing for each other a little more. But I think things started to unravel a little bit with the losing and the situation that eventually, came with the head coaching change. First game, I try not to put a lot of stock in last night, but I do think that there's some energy in that direction, Alex, that, that's the type of team that they know they can be, and they want to get out there and show Jim Montgomery that they are playing for each other. It's a long season. Are you doing this in 6 weeks, 8 weeks when the similar situations occur like we saw last night? That's going to be the thing. But I do think that last night what we saw from the team is definitely the way that this team needs to play together and the way that Jim Montgomery wants them to play.
Jeremy Rutherford is our guest for just another minute here on 101 ESPN. Read his great work over at The Athletic and follow him on Twitter at JP Rutherford. JR, last question that I've got for you. Earlier today, there was a report nationally that, the Blues might be interested in adding another scoring winger. My name that immediately comes to mind, of course, given the reports from yesterday, is, the Blues are clearly going to be trading for Chris Kreider. I don't know if that's likely or completely off the table, but I did want to ask you, do you think this team, now that they've added Jim Montgomery, which seems to suggest that the front office believes they can win this year, do you think they're going to try to be aggressive in adding prior to the deadline or even over the next month?
I keep it this simple. I think that the Blues want to make the playoffs, and I think that anything they do is still going to be first and foremost with the eye on the future. You know, Doug Armstrong basically says it in every press conference that we're not going to trade picks and assets, you know, to get better. Right now, in terms of adding key players, I think that he still is okay with the idea that this is going to be a process. Having said that, I go back to what I said. He wants to make the playoffs. So if there's going to be a player out there that doesn't cost, you know, premium players, draft picks, assets, you know, I think he would try to do something like that. You know, in terms of Kreider, I was in New York yesterday, talked to New York writers. You know, they felt, you know, here's a really fast guy, right, an established guy in the league. But maybe just to, you know, is he losing a step? You don't know. So, you know, I think he's definitely a guy who could help the team, but I just can't see Doug Armstrong making a huge move to make the team a contender this year when he still thinks that this is a process.
Makes sense. I mean, the number 20 is not available right now here in St. Louis, so you probably have to move Saad in such a deal. Makes the money work for both sides, makes the jersey number work here in St. Louis.
If there's one thing this team needs is another 33-year-old winger.
I mean, $6.5 million, you're upgrading from what you have in $4.5 million in Brandon Saad. They want to shake things up. You want to shake things up. It's basically Alec Boehm for Nolan Arenado.
Look, man, you're just looking for somebody who takes a deflection off of your nose.
Well, his nose would work too. So, I mean, we're kindred spirits here.
No, I'll say it like my kids tell me every day. I got you. I got you.
Oh, I thought they were going to say, Dad, you're so mid.
They do. They bet
JR, appreciate the time as always, man. Looking forward to that tweet that says that Chris Kreider is the newest St. Louis Blue. Can't wait to see that, man.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sitting here rolling it out. You know, I know that he is available, and I know that Army's always exploring.
Damn it, JR, rule it out so we have to stop talking about this. Every day he walks into show prep. All right, boys, so the league, Chris Kreider to the Blues.
Appreciate you, JR. Enjoy New York,
yeah,
man.
it would be pretty bougie. All right, we'll see you guys.
Mid, bruh. Did you ever just use the word bougie?
Yeah, I don't think it was in the correct.
No.
He is so mid.
Yeah, so mid. Bruh.
We're going to talk more about the Blues' quest for a goal scorer coming up in the 1 o'clock hour.
I've got 5 guys that I would get over Chris Kreider. T-Bone hit my open.
I don't believe you do. I think you've got like 2.
No, I got 3, but give me like
2 of them are from the same team.
All right, email me and I'll do the team on 3.
No, that one doesn't count because he's not getting traded mid-season.
Brady Kachuk?
He's not getting traded mid-season, so everybody can tone that one down. You give me 2 segments, I'll give you 2 more guys.
I know it sounds crazy for the Blues. Like, I've been... Can I toot my own horn for a second?
Oh, here we go.
Alex, we as a show have been pretty spot on about what Doug Armstrong's going to do in recent years. Yeah. No, I'm not even kidding. Like, we miss on the Cardinals all the time.
Yeah. Well, that's because Mo's just a freaking wild card.
We have nailed a lot of what the Blues have done over, like, really the last 4 years.
Pavel Buchnevich, Nick Leddy, Philip Broberg. Brandon Saad.
Jim Montgomery. Drew Bannister prior to that. Like, we have nailed a lot
Marty
of this
Ferk,
stuff.
ladies and gentlemen. Martin Ferk.
Yeah, you got that one, buddy.
You're darn right I did.
Them re-signing Neighbor, like a lot of the stuff that Army has done is super aggressive, but also
trading Torrey Krug. We were on that in terms of
not
it could happen.
Perron or O'Reilly.
The specific team that would potentially trade for Krug being Philadelphia and what you could get. Like a lot of this has made a lot of sense.
Toot toot.
They have said they want to have a specific type of player going to the front of the net. We have now heard from multiple places what Jim Montgomery values in his forwards, how he wants there to be at all times somebody standing in front of the net. They are clearly viewing themselves as a legit playoff contender this year, even if not a cup contender this year. Them going after Chris Kreider, in theory, especially where we were with the team 6 months ago, sounds ridiculous. Just patently absurd. He's 33 years old, makes $6.5 million, and has multiple years left on his contract. That's the opposite of the kind of move that I would have expected them to make 6 months ago. As of today, it would not surprise me at all if this is the kind of move that they made. I'm not predicting that they're going to do it, but I think it should absolutely be worthy of exploration for them, especially if the Rangers are looking at this right now of, we need to shake things up. If it's not we need to get younger, we need to get assets in return, we need a draft pick in return. If they want somebody that can help them right now, I think Brandon Saad makes a lot of sense for them, man. I think Chris Kreider makes a lot of sense for the Blues. You make the swap, maybe the Blues add in some kind of a prospect in the deal to make it worth the time for the Rangers. Boom, you're good to go.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you at all. Like, he is a guy that could help your team for the now. The question is, can he help you for the future? And that's the part that I'm a little skeptical of when you're 33 years old. And if you're the Rangers, Brandon Saad doesn't help me right now. Like, Brandon Saad is a lesser version of Chris Kreider, because at least Chris Kreider,
fewer years left.
But I don't know if they're going
Shake things
cheaper
up
as
in the
much as they're
locker room.
going for somebody who can contribute more, to where, like, if I'm the Rangers, I'd look at that and say, yeah, if I want to get cheaper and better, give me Zack Bolduc.
I just don't know what they're getting for him.
That's the question.
Like,
I mean,
if they want to contend, because they want to contend right now.
Yeah.
They're trading these guys because they're not producing enough.
and you got to bring in a guy
eyes.
who could put 35-plus goals up in the season.
Yeah.
Like, I don't feel like Chris Kreider is available. I feel like this is them trying to light a fire under Chris Kreider and say, like I think Jacob Trouba is available. He's been available since the offseason and nobody's biting. I think Chris Kreider is available, but it's going to have to be a Godfather offer to where another team says, yeah, we'll take him and we'll give you our best player for him.
I don't know, man. I don't know. Just reading the tea leaves, I think there might be something here. I think there might be a little something.
Hey, man, if you get this, I will applaud you. I'm not so certain on this one, but there are a few other guys that I'm reading the tea leaves on.
Alex, we'll get into that coming up. The 1 o'clock hour junk drawer coming up next year on 101 ESPN. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Alex, what do you got for us today?
All right, guys. So I found something that was a headliner today that basically is like the world of Ferrario. This is my nightmare. We know that there's a lot of movies coming out or are out.
You got this, man. You got
almost
this.
got there. That have songs involved with them, right? Like Wicked is out. Everybody goes and sees it. Moana 2 is coming out. Well, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, he believes that people should be allowed to sing along with movies in the movie theater.
Oh, God, this is the Wicked thing.
And I would never. Like, I'm already don't go to the movies very often. Deadpool was the first movie I went and saw in a really long time. If there's people that sing in movies, I am so far out, it's not even funny.
Yeah.
Save the singing for your damn car.
They've already posted a bunch of signs outside of the door for these movie theaters where
but
they're
there's no
showing
singing.
Wicked, where it's like, hey, man, can you guys let everybody enjoy the movie?
Yeah.
Like, I understand it. I get the appeal of singing during it. And feel free when it comes out at home or when you're watching
Or
it in
listen
the
to the
comfort of
damn
your own
album
home.
on the way home.
Feel free to sing along and belt it as loud as you'd like. When you're in the theater, can you have a little bit of respect?
This would piss me off to no ends. Like when I saw Bohemian Rhapsody when it came out, and this was obviously pre-COVID, this is a while ago.
Did you like that movie?
I liked it. I thought they did a good job with it. And it was great music. You love listening to Queen. But if somebody is in that movie...
Yesterday, the one that was about the nobody had ever
Beatles.
heard the Beatles before, and this guy was like the only one that had their albums. And he's like, I guess I'm just going to go ahead and recreate their album.
Might as well
history.
do this.
That's the other... great movie ideas because it's essentially it's an excuse to just play their music throughout the entirety of the movie, and people like the music. So, anyways,
I hate the idea of somebody being selfish enough to ruin a movie experience because they want to sing along.
I'm with you.
Have you seen Wicked yet?
No, not yet.
Kara's family enjoyed it.
So I saw the
One of them
musical.
said it's a top 10 movie they've ever seen, and that's aggressive.
I saw
That does seem aggressive.
the musical was really good. My wife went to school for musical theater, so like we've seen the musicals. I'm out on movies that are 3.5 hours.
That's how long
I think it's
Wicked
like a
is
3-hour movie,
There's
and it's a two-parter.
It's like an intermission, yeah.
for a musical.
Yeah, and the musical's 3 hours. Let alone I got to go see a movie of part one.
Out.
So like I understand it. It's a movie that people have been wanting to see, and it's
doubt.
great that they put it for the theater. But like, I don't need to go see a damn movie for 3 hours and then say part 2's coming
Somebody on the
next.
text line said they figured this out. Guys, theaters are showing specific movies that allow for singing. That's your happy medium. They've got specific showings that allow for singing inside of the theater.
I don't have a problem with that.
Cool.
How do you enjoy? Like, and again,
If
that's not
everybody
for
else
me.
wants to be in, if you know ahead of time, hey, this
Yeah.
is going to be a
Yeah, I'm in
showing
on
where
that.
we're allowed to sing, cool, man.
Yeah.
Not my problem.
I was gonna say not my cup of tea, but hey, if that's what you want to do, go for it. Man, I feel like it would suck. Like the whole point of me going to the movie is to see these people professionally sing it so I can enjoy it. And like you're going to pay money to watch
I
the
get
movie.
the appeal if you're somebody that enjoy it. Like, hey, if I love the music, I want to sing along. I can get why you'd want to do that, but I also have to understand, hey, I'm in the theater with Alex. Alex doesn't want to hear me sing.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sing
but
yourself.
if we're going to a showing that is for sing-along time, basically,
And that would work good for like little kids, like you mentioned Moana too. Like when that comes out,
yeah, like
that
my
would make
dog-
sense. Like there are some people that maybe go and they don't want to sing along with it.
But you got to know what you're getting into when you go see a
agree.
kids movie. You're bringing
100%.
kids like we're taking Adelaide to see it when it comes out. We know she's probably gonna just start randomly singing in the middle of the movie.
Well, you're in theater too.
And you know what
I'm
you're
in
doing.
theater one. Well, I can just sit and enjoy it.
And I would love that too, to where it was like a kids theater and an adult theater, because like I'm already like
So you can,
I've got anxiety about taking my 3-year-old to the movie because like I don't want to distress other people around me.
Sure.
But it's like she's 3 and she wants to see Moana, so I want to take her so she can enjoy it.
we're going to the movies tomorrow night. I'm going to see Gladiator 2. Little different experience than seeing
BK's the guy that's going to
I
go
don't know. I don't know what the experience is.
Not sure there's going to be any
Yeah.
sing-alongs, but hey, you never know.
Yeah, you're not singing, but BK's going to stand up on his chair with no shirt on and go, "Are you not entertained?"
You should do that.
And everyone's like, "Down in front, you loser! All I can see is your nose! Sit down!"
Coming up next. College football playoff rankings are coming out tonight. Which teams are we honed in on prior to tonight's reveal? We'll talk about it next on 101 ESPN. The college football playoff rankings are going to be revealed tonight with Alex and T-Bone on BK. Alex, I don't really care who they have as number 1, number 2, number 3. That stuff at this point in the season, not all that important to me. That'll be shaken out over the next couple of weeks as we get into the final week of the regular season. And then, of course, the conference championship games. But there are some things that I'm going to be looking at that I think are really important, and they'll be telling signs of where teams will shake out over the next couple of weeks. For me, the number 1 team I'm curious about is Indiana. Where does Indiana fit into this after their blowout loss on the road last week against Ohio State? They do not have another chance for a quality win. Their final game of the regular season will be this upcoming weekend against Purdue. That's not going to change, and barring something unforeseen. That should not change anything about how the committee views their resume. So if they're in right now, they should be in next week. If they're out right now, though, I don't see any way that they get back into the mix of the top 12. So for me, Indiana will be the number 1 team that I'm looking for in this rankings reveal. Who do you have as like the team that you'll be monitoring going into tonight's reveal?
Mine's Alabama. Mostly because I think they're going to be probably one of those first 4 teams out because of just the 3 losses that they've got on the schedule. But I'm most curious of kind of where they fall in with the rankings, because you've got them, you've got South Carolina, you've got Clemson in terms of how the college football playoff committee is looking at this thing. Because if you're Alabama, yes, you've got those 3 losses and a couple of them just aren't pretty, but you also have top 15 or top 10 wins, top 25 wins. So I'm kind of curious where Alabama is at, because what once felt like there were 4 or 5 SEC teams getting in now feels like you're probably only getting 3, and the other SEC teams are going to be looking up wondering what's next.
Yeah, I'm fascinated with those 3-loss teams in the SEC, because it was interesting when the committee looked at them, and I don't think they were wrong at the time. You know, they were putting basically every 2-loss SEC team ahead of the ACC 1-loss teams like Miami, SMU. I think only one of them maybe ranked ahead of them, including the Big 12 teams like BYU at the time when they had 1 loss, was behind some of those 2-loss teams in the SEC. Okay, well, now how does that change now that they've got 3 losses?
Yep.
And where it really gets interesting is with those 3 teams, now how do you look at SMU, Miami, and Clemson, who's got 2 losses, but one of those is to Notre Dame, who's in the playoff, and has a potential another game where they can beat one of those 3-loss teams in South Carolina this weekend in their rivalry game. So
the ACC became really interesting last weekend.
Yes, I'm fascinated to know what they do with them, because I think it's a clear argument of SMU, Miami's ahead of them, of those 3-loss teams. Clemson's the one where I'm a little curious to know what they do with. Will they kind of be slotted ahead of those 3-loss teams, or will the committee still say, no, you guys play in the ACC, you still belong behind these 3-loss teams in the SEC? That's kind of the 4-team kind of jumble that I'm curious to know what the committee does with.
So SMU is into the ACC championship game no matter what. They have clinched a spot. SMU has. The second spot will be had by either Clemson or Miami. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Miami has the tiebreaker right now. They would be the one that would get in as long as they win this weekend against Syracuse. If I'm not mistaken, with the way that this thing shakes out.
What a rivalry.
Miami,
so
Syracuse.
Miami versus SMU.
Make sure I gotta watch
going
that
to
one.
the ACC championship game. If you're Clemson, that's probably what you're rooting for, right?
Yeah.
You want to not play in the ACC championship game, strangely. Like, you want to get in because you want the chance at a top 4 spot, potentially. But you also kind of don't want to get in, because it's like, hey, if we don't have to play in the ACC championship game, we will go 11-1, and we'll have just had a win this week against South Carolina, or 10-2, and we have just had a real big win this week against South Carolina, which potentially puts us into the playoff without the risk of losing in the ACC championship game, which could then bump us back out of the playoff. I think that's probably what Clemson would want. And then the winner of Miami versus SMU would take the other spot, and the ACC would end up getting 2 teams in that scenario.
Does Boise State move into a first-round bye?
Yes, as of today, they would probably get a first round bye.
So they're going to be one of those first 4 teams that gets the bye.
Most likely, because the Big 12 has fallen out. The Big 12 will not. It's very unlikely that the Big 12 will get a first-round bye. They have 1 spot. Like, they get 1 spot, and whoever wins the conference is in.
1.
As of today, it's Arizona State, most likely.
You guys have been terrible. You get 1 and enjoy it.
That'll all come down to the Big 12 championship game. I think there's a chance for like a 17 tie, if I'm not mistaken, atop the Big 12. They had to come up with another a tiebreaker scenario that they had just recently released. Yeah, so they've got with either 2 or 3 losses right now, Arizona State, BYU, Iowa State, Colorado, Baylor, K-State, TCU, Texas Tech, and West Virginia. All 9 of those teams are at either 2 or 3 losses in the conference slate so far this year.
Oh, I love it. Chaos.
See, this is what we all wanted. We wanted the expansion.
No, I don't want to watch. I don't want to watch a Big 12 team in a playoff. But
you get one.
I love the fact that there's a scenario where you've got like a 7-way tie.
You mentioned Alabama, Alex. That's one team that I'll be looking at. It's really like that pack of SEC teams that had their struggles this week. So Bama, Texas A&M, Ole Miss.
The 3 teams that we all thought were going to be fighting for one of those 6 spots in the playoff committee is now fighting for 1 because there's 3 that are getting in and maybe 4.
The other team I'm just fascinated by is South Carolina and how the committee will view them, because they lost against LSU, but their quarterback got hurt in that game. So there is some context that should be taken into account there. They got blown out by Ole Miss, but that's a quality victory technically. And they lost a really close game against Alabama. They also have quality victories on the season against Texas A&M and against Missouri, and the potential for another really good win this weekend against Clemson, and that one would come on the road as well. That is a pretty good resume at 9-3 in the SEC. They will not have to play in the SEC championship game, so there's no chance of them like getting knocked back down. I'll be fascinated to see where they end up, and could they be the benefactor of one of the SEC teams losing in the conference championship game, one of the ACC teams losing in their championship game as well? Is there still an outside shot of South Carolina making it in? They'd probably have to be ranked in the top like 14 to be able to get there. That's something that I'll be monitoring tonight as well.
Yeah, they're an interesting case study because you're right. Like, they've got a decent resume when you look at them as a 3-loss team. But the reminder for me of all of this is what you just said of, do they get in the top 14? And then, oh, by the way, they're going to be a huge benefactor of those championship games. Those conference championship games should not hurt a team when they get there, because it's ridiculous that you could have SMU and let's say Miami ends up winning this week and gets to the ACC championship game. You know, and then you've got, let's say it's Texas and Georgia that get to the SEC championship game. None of those teams that lose that game should be hurt so much that they get knocked out of the playoff, right? It should mean something to get to the conference championship. And that was one issue I still had with the playoff committee back when it was 4 teams. We saw that happen to, I think it was USC, who lost the Pac-12 championship and then out, just gone. Didn't you play that extra game? You are punished for earning that extra game for being one of the best in your conference. I think that's ridiculous. I hope the committee will not look at it that way, but I fear they're going to.
You kind of have to, right? Like, it's an extra data point. So if I'm the committee, I look at it and I say, well, you're giving me this extra data point. How do I not look at it? If I'm going to prop up a team because they won their conference championship, not only like with the bye, but also, you know, it boosts them up within that top 4 where they end up being ranked based on their resume. And it's like, if Texas, for example, ends up in at the SEC championship game, they deserve to get a bump if they beat Georgia in that game, right? Like, or if Oregon beats, what would it be, Penn State, Ohio State, whoever it is. If they beat them again in the conference championship, I'm going to continue to boost them up a little bit accordingly. Or if Ohio State, vice versa, if Ohio State ends up winning that game, dude, that's one hell of a resume that they have now put together so far on the season. So if I'm going to do it on that side of things, you almost have to then take into account the loss. I think A&M is the most fascinating team in this scenario because they're still technically up for the SEC championship game, right? Like, if Tennessee were to lose, Georgia is in, and then Texas were to lose against A&M this week, I believe A&M gets that spot into, So if A&M wins this weekend, they're in to the SEC championship game against Georgia. If they lose next week against Georgia, after having beaten now Texas head-to-head, if they get like a close loss, they're going to be on the outside looking in. It's a crazy time for college football.
I get what you're saying if you get that extra data point, so shouldn't we punish those teams if they lose? Well, I don't get an extra data point on the teams that are on the outside looking in.
I'm with you.
Which is ridiculous.
But then it becomes a conference issue. That is not something that the committee should have to handle. That is something that you as a conference should decide, do we have a conference championship game or not? Is the upside of having this worth the potential risk?
They won't care about the upside, because let me tell you what the beauty of it is. It's the
$50 million,
beautiful green dollar bills that come rolling
it's good.
in.
It's good if you're the college football committee. Who cares?
No doubt. It's worth it to them because of the money that it is able to support.
Money rules all. And when you understand that.
There are a billion issues with college athletics, right, in the NCAA. I never thought I would get to a spot where I'm like, man, you should really hope to never get to your conference championship in football. Yeah. Never thought we'd get to that point.
And like the upside of it is still real. If you're Texas, Ohio State, Oregon, like there is still upside of, hey, we don't have to play in that first round, which is mostly going to be 50-50 propositions. Like there will be a significant favorite that ends up losing that first round of the college football playoff this year. That's going to happen most likely. So we avoid that. That's a good thing. But the downside is also very, very real for these teams.
And as I've mentioned before, the downside if you lose, like Penn State, or not Penn State, sorry, Ohio State and Oregon, I think they're locks for the Big Ten championship game. There might be one outside weird thing like Ohio State loses this weekend. But the downside for them is, okay, sure, if you win, you get a bye for that first round. If you're Ohio State, let's say, and they lose to Oregon, not only do you lose, you don't get a bye, and you have to play a team that had a bye by not making it to their conference championship game, which is stupid.
Yeah, because then there's a chance you're on the road.
Yeah, and you don't even earn a home playoff game, which is ridiculous.
All right, last thing that I did want to mention here, somebody on the text line asked this. I think it's a interesting question. If we had a 4-team playoff this year.
You saw that. I saw this too.
Instead of a 12-team playoff.
Good luck, man.
What do you do? Because... like, you want to talk about teams, T-Bone, getting docked by the conference championship. What really would have happened is, in the scenario where you continue to have the conference championship and we have the 4 teams in the playoff, one of Oregon or Ohio State is out.
Yeah. You
Whoever
get one
loses
of those.
that game, out. And you know who gets in? Penn State.
Yep.
Because they didn't play in the conference championship game. Penn State remains with 1 loss. Potentially Ohio State, let's say Ohio State loses that game again against Oregon. Because they had to play 2 games this year against Oregon head-to-head, they would be the team that likely falls out of the college football playoff, putting in Texas, Penn State, and probably Notre Dame.
Not Boise State?
No. Boise wouldn't get into a 4-team playoff. But I think Notre Dame would be that 4th team. But it would be a conversation of, does Notre Dame's loss against Northern Illinois outweigh the 2 losses that Ohio State had head-to-head against Oregon?
If you told me that was the
debate
playoffs this year, I would hate that.
I'd love it. It'd be an awesome conversation.
That would be terrible.
You know the other reason why it sucks, Alex, is because as of today, there would be basically 5 teams that remain as possibilities for the playoff in that scenario. Everybody else is all but eliminated. Agreed, but it makes it so much more fun. And like right now, if you're a fan of the following teams, you are engaged in the college football playoff rankings tonight. Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame, Georgia, Tennessee, Miami, SMU, Indiana, Boise State, Clemson, Alabama, Arizona State, Ole Miss, South Carolina, Iowa State because they're in the Big 12, Tulane because of the G5 spot, BYU because they're in the Big 12, Texas A&M. All 20 teams that I just mentioned are at least somewhat compelled to watch the college football playoff rankings reveal tonight. That is what college football wanted. That is what college football needed. That is the positive, the real positive that has come from this expanded postseason. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Coming up next, how are you evaluating the rest of the season now that the Blues have locked in Jim Montgomery as their head coach? Have you changed at all the way that you're evaluating them? We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN. With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. So the Blues have made it very clear, based on their actions, not their words, and their words as well, frankly. They're trying to win this year, Alex. Yes, they're in the midst of a retool. I think there was something that was said on Sunday with Doug Armstrong's media availability, though, that got a little misrepresented, where he said, yeah, we're still in this retool. We're not, like, pushing all in right now, and that, like, this doesn't change our timeline. I think he was talking about we're not pushing Dvorsky to get up to the NHL level before he's ready to go. Same thing for Theo Lindstein, right? Same thing for Stenberg.
Yeah, I mean, they're in Sweden. They can't come over here until their seasons are over.
Ridiculous. He wants this team to win. Like the pressure is on for this team to perform right now. He believes they have players internally that are ready to go, that can push for a playoff spot, if not a cup. Like, this is not a cup contender, but should be a potential playoff contender in their eyes. Alex, now that Jim Montgomery's in place and you have what is a championship pedigree coach, in my opinion, and you're just like a point below 500 today, how does this change the way you're evaluating the team the rest of the way, if at all?
I look at this team as they believe they're a playoff contender, and if you're a playoff contender, what do? You push the pedal to the metal to get to the playoffs, and you're aggressive in all facets of your team. The part that everyone's like, oh, you got Jim Montgomery, bring up these young guys down. No. You could have Scotty Bowman behind the bench, and they would not be bringing Dalibor Dvorsky up because they want him to develop in the minors the same way that they've had other players develop in the minors. Jordan Kyrou was this way. They didn't want to put him at the NHL until they felt like he was ready, and they kept him down there for a few years. Jimmy Snuggerud can't come over till the end of the college season, so that's off the table. The guys in Sweden don't come over to the end of their season in Sweden, so that's off the table. So you're not bringing any of these younger players on board to try and get there. What you're doing is you're waiting for them to be ready so that you could just drop them into your lineup at the end of the season next year when your team is competitive. So that's why I look at this roster now and say, okay, Doug has been aggressive in the sense of he went out there and got Broberg and Holloway. He's been aggressive in to bring in a head coach that he deemed good enough to get this team into a winning window, i.e., remember Ken Hitchcock in 2011, 2012. They did that. Now he's going to look at this roster and say, where are we weakest? Because wherever we are weakest, we're going to make changes. You also have to look at it and say, he's not bringing in somebody who is going to block a Dvorsky or a Snuggerud so that when they're ready, they just say, nope, he's not going to be here. And they're not going to trade those pieces away for NHL help right now because he feels that they're a part of their core. But how I'm evaluating this team is they believe they're a playoff contender. They're not a cup contender. They're not a team that expects to go deep into the playoffs. But they believe they should be one of the 8 teams that are in the conversation for the postseason. And as they continue to develop their younger players, they push for a playoff spot with the core pieces that are here right now.
Yeah, and I think, when the season started, the way I was looking at them, and they, as they were saying it as a retool, was I had no real expectations. I was going to live with the 5-6 game losing streaks. I was going to live with some of the highs in the 5-game winning streak. But I had no expectation, and it was kind of not really judging them on, hey, they need to make the playoffs. Well, now that you fired your coach and are bringing in Jim Montgomery, like every time that we evaluate a Blues game now, my thought process isn't like, okay, here's where you saw some of the learning curves. The Kyrou one where we had talked about it where he had the turnover. Okay, well, that's a learning moment, so it's not – you're not going to be too critical of it because it's still a learning moment. No. Now I'm judging on, okay, now I'm evaluating you as if you want to be a playoff team. Yep. And that is why when, there are some lineup decisions now of whatever it may end up being, of maybe Bolduc comes out or maybe they end up having Kyrou has that turnover moment. Well, now I am going to be a little bit more critical because if you're going to tell me you're firing your coach, bringing in Jim Montgomery, and though you're still saying you're in a retool, and I do agree, he probably was more referring to, hey, we're not calling up the Dvorskys. You do believe you're a playoff team then if you're making this coaching change. And that's why my expectation is every game now I'm judging them on, okay, those little mistakes do matter now because I'm judging you on, to me, you need to make the NHL playoffs. Yeah,
in terms of roster decisions with what they do with this team, it would not surprise me if they make a trade at some point because 2011, 2012, they had their young core of players. They brought in a couple of those older veterans. They had already made the trade of Eric Johnson for Chris Stewart and Kevin Shattenkirk, kind of similar to Broberg and Holloway. But the following year at that trade deadline, they acquired Jay Bouwmeester. They went out there and they got a top 4 defenseman because guess what? That was the area they were weakest in. They had the Petrangelos. They had the Shattenkirks. They needed somebody who was at the top. They had the younger players in Tarasenko and Schwartz. They needed an area to fill that they were weakest in. And that's why I look at this team and say where they're weakest is offense. They're going to look at this and say, hey, Dvorsky and Snuggerud will be here. We need to fix our offense now.
Yeah, and to that point, I think I think this time of the season is typically a little early to know for not every team, but a lot of teams, if are you a buyer, are you a seller when it comes to the trade deadline. I think November 24th, on whatever time that press release went out that Jim Montgomery has become the St. Louis Blues head coach and they fired Drew Bannister, told me right away they became buyers at the NHL trade deadline. Like, they're buyers now. And it's not a coincidence that reports are suddenly coming out and saying, hey, the Blues are shopping for goal scoring.
I think they're buyers and sellers. I think they're going to view a lot of the pieces that are here now that have modified no trades, the Sods, the Lettys. They're the ones that are expiring on this team, and they'll look at this as we can sell and we can buy at the same time. And there are going to be a few teams that you can kind of exploit in terms of they got guys that just they need a change as well. And now you look at your roster and say, well, how do we do this?
And man, just like look at the money that they have available. They've got almost $6 million in cap space, which means if you like project based on a cap space for the full season, they could go acquire somebody that makes $6.5–7 million.
Who would that be, BK?
I'm not anticipating them necessarily doing that, but
yeah, wait a minute.
Like Chris Kreider, for example.
Okay.
I will be curious to see what they're trying to target.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is like, I think they're going to try to go get a goal scorer. But what does that goal scorer look like? Like, is it a big dude that stands in front of the net? Do they feel like they need another one of those? I think they could really use a shooter as well.
They need a finisher.
Like, I don't know if this guy's going to be made available this year at the deadline, but what has David Perron done this year?
He wasn't with the team early because they were having some family issues with one of his newborn kids. So he's had 9 games with them and he doesn't have a point right now.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. But he was dealing with some personal stuff with his family at the beginning of the season where he joined the team late. But I like where you're at with.
Only reason I bring that up is because, like, not a big contract, knows the system, like familiar with the area.
The power play problem.
Exactly. Has a good shot.
And see, I don't think they're looking at older players. I think they're going to be in the same.
Why not, though?
Because I think they're in the same line of thinking as Holloway and Broberg. Let's go get somebody who's in the same window. Let's add to the core that we already have.
Didn't those guys Snuggerud and Dvorsky?
Potentially. The other thing with that, Alex, is those guys typically get traded in the offseason.
Yeah.
Like, those are typically moves that you make in June or July.
Maybe, but if you're Ottawa, and this is the team that I'm targeting, right? Ottawa and Philly are the 2 teams that I'm targeting right now because they're already in the rumors. There was the reporter for TSN said they need to shake up their core in Ottawa because they believe they're a playoff contender. And like, if you're Ottawa, you know you have to keep Brady Tkachuk happy before he wants out. So like, if you're them, they've got a Drake Batherson. They've got a Josh Norris. They've got a Shane Pinto. These guys are 24, 25, 26 years old that are top 6 wingers that if you're them, you need to shake up your core somehow. The Philadelphia Flyers believed they were a team that could compete. They haven't been there. They're talking about one of their young centermen and Morgan Frost that they need to get rid of. Like, there are teams that you can go to now and say, hey, you trying to shake things up? Because if you are, we could shake things up with you.
If those guys become available, that would be my preference for me, and I would imagine for Doug Armstrong. Mm-hmm. Typically, the way this works is like we hear these rumors, we hear these reports. Hell, we've heard it here in St. Louis as they've been bad in recent seasons where it's like, oh, are the Blues going to make a real shakeup here? Like, could they trade Jordan Kyrou? Could they trade Colton Parayko? Could they trade one of what we thought was going to be a core piece? And then suddenly, no, they're not going to do any of those different things. They're going to trade the guys that are on expiring deals, right? Ivan Barbashev, Vladimir Tarasenko, Ryan O'Reilly. All of these things are what they end up doing. That's typically what you see at the deadline. It's possible this year ends up being different. There are a lot of teams that are facing a crossroads in their build. So maybe they decide, hey, let's do this in March instead of doing it in July. And it sets us up for the offseason potentially. But if that doesn't happen, that's where you get to the, all right, what is Army going to be interested in? What is he going to be looking to acquire? And frankly, how long does he wait? Because it sounds like New York wants to make a move sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
So do you pass up on that opportunity for the potential of something happening in February or March?
Well, and that's why you see so many teams make deals around this time. And it's why the rumor mill gets so big before the Christmas break, because we've talked about the stat before, 76% of the teams that are in a playoff spot by Thanksgiving make the playoffs. Yep. Teams, you view this as, hey, once November wraps up, if we're not in a competing position for a playoff spot, we got to do something. Otherwise, we're going to be selling at the deadline, which is why I go to an Ottawa Senators team that's 3-6-1 in their last 10. If you're them, this was supposed to be the year that you started winning. You brought in a new coach. You basically traded for a goaltender, and your team hasn't been good. Those teams typically make moves now and sometimes live to regret those trades because they realize they had to be in a better competitive situation than where they were before the Thanksgiving holiday.
He's Alex. That's T-Bone. I'm BK. Before we get out of here, Alex, I did read something from ESPN.com a little bit earlier today talking about the Blues, and they graded every team in the NHL for what they've done at the quarter point of the season, now that we have reached that point. They gave the Blues a D, and here's a piece of what they had to say about this. They said, if not for the Predators, the argument could be made that the Blues have had the most disappointing start to the season of any team in the Western Conference. They were 6 points out of the wild card spot last year, and then they made a bunch of additions in the offseason. That's why Armstrong felt a coaching change in late November was necessary. It'll now be up to Montgomery to help the Blues avoid missing the playoffs for a third straight year. Do you think that's fair? Would you give them a D for what we've seen so far?
No, I would give them a C. They underwhelmed for a team that believed they could compete, but there was a reason why. You didn't have your best player in Robert Thomas, and you didn't have one of your best defensemen in Philip Broberg. Goaltending underperformed a little bit this season, in my opinion. Defensively, you were significantly improved, and offensively, you weren't there, but when you pluck one big piece out and you're playing another guy in a position he's not comfortable with, there's going to be underwhelming moments. So I think D's a little too harsh. I think F would absolutely be too harsh because this team wasn't expected to be a playoff team. The hope was the front office believed. I would give them a C because I thought it was average with all the injuries they dealt with.
I think I'd go C+ because of those injuries. I'm grading on a curve. My expectations coming into the year were clearly not in line with what their expectations were, so maybe by their expectations it'd be lower. But for my expectations, I mean, Jordan Kyrou is close to a point-per-game player so far this year. Colton Parayko's looked the part. Broberg looks the part. You've had some young players that appear to have added themselves to the core, like a Dylan Holloway, for example. So I'd go C+. I think that feels about right for me.
Yeah, I'd go C. I think D is a little too harsh because of the injuries, and that's still me grading them on, hey, they believe they're a playoff team. I think C's right because if Thomas and Broberg were healthy and this was their record when they fired Drew Bannister, then I would say it probably is a D because their expectations were playoffs. But because you had those injuries in there, it does throw a little bit of a loophole there.
He's Alex the T-Bone. I'm BK. Coming up next, I do want to talk a little bit about a trade that was floated by MLB.com for the St. Louis Cardinals. I think it's ridiculous. I think there's no chance of this happening. But I do think it speaks to Nolan Arenado having a little bit more value in the public sphere than what we're making it out to be here locally. We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN. Alex, when we bet, we want to win the most money possible, as we've seen with our Pick'em Challenge. It's not the easiest thing to do to win regularly with your football picks, but when you win, you want to make sure that you're getting that return on your investment. And that is exactly what happens with the Circa Sports app in the state of Illinois. Alex, I've got a 3-leg moneyline parlay for Thursday's Thanksgiving slate in the NFL. I'm going with the 3 favorites. Lions, Cowboys, and Packers, all on the money line. $100 over on Circa wins you $191. If you made the exact same bet on FanDuel, you're winning $180. It's $10 less return on your investment. This is why we bet with Circa Sports in Illinois.
You all heard BK's inner thoughts when he made those bets. He was like, now, why would these lines be that way? I don't understand these. So probably fade him, but regardless of what you're doing, do it on Circa Sports Illinois. Tight money line splits, future bets. You're bringing in the most money possible because Circa is not limiting you based off of your winning. So download it today. Get ready for Thanksgiving with Circa Sports Illinois. If you or somebody you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. The Blues ended up winning in Jim Montgomery's head coaching debut with them last night as they took down the Rangers 5-2. They'll be back in action tomorrow night as they visit the New Jersey Devils. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 5 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Kerber for Puck Drop at 6. The Sports Center update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Alex, I think this trade offer is ridiculous. I want to say that on the front end. But Major League Baseball tweeted this out with MLB Network. Anthony Castrovins, who I actually think does a really good job. I think
he just crapped on his trade proposal, but sure, go ahead.
Does really good work. And this time of the year is tough because you're putting together these trade proposals, and nobody knows how individual teams value prospects. But that's the job. That's what we do. So I wanted to throw this out there. Alex, he has a potential 3-team trade, a blockbuster for Black Friday, between the Phillies, the Cardinals, and the Mariners.
Did he label it Blockbuster for Black Friday?
Yeah, Blockbuster Trade Ideas for Black Friday is what it's called.
Yeah,
way to go, clever. Anthony.
And it's the Phillies acquire Nolan Arenado and Ryan Helsley plus cash considerations from the Cardinals.
Oh, Cardinals can't give up cash.
And Emerson Hancock, who's a pitcher with the Mariners.
Oh, I thought he was with us.
Say, there's no Emerson Hancock on this Cardinals team.
That name.
The Cardinals can't give up cash.
Acquire Alec Boehm.
Oh, well, screw this trade.
That makes sense for both of those parties so far.
Yeah.
The Cardinals, for giving up Arenado, Helsley, and money, get Justin Crawford, an outfield prospect, number 3 prospect in the Philly system. He's a big-time prospect for them. That alone would be a pretty good return. Mick Abel, who doesn't know how to throw strikes but throws it really hard and has in the past been considered to be a real legit starting pitching prospect, if nothing else, relief option for you. And Lazaro Montes, T-Bone, you said you looked him up. He's a big-time prospect in the Seattle Mariners system, but like 100 years away.
Yeah, he's like in the high A-ball right now. He looks like what Chase Davis was doing.
There you go.
2.0.
So that's the prospect capital that you'd be getting in return. You get nothing that necessarily helps you next year, but you get prospects, a couple of which are close to the big league level in Crawford and Abel. And in return, you're giving up Nolan Arenado, Ryan Helsley, and cash considerations. Alex, the reason that I wanted to bring this up is not so much the individual players that he has them getting back in return for Arenado and Helsley. It is that I think we are underestimating locally a bit the value that Nolan Arenado still has for certain general managers. Because this is a guy who, even last year in a down season, made contact a ton. He's not a guy that strikes out. He's going to hit for some average. And if you're a championship contending club like the Yankees, like the Phillies, that defense at third base will be meaningful in the postseason. And if you could plop him batting 5th or 6th in a really good lineup, hell, I think the Dodgers, I would feel the same way about. If you could put him into the 5-6 hole in a really good lineup, I think he'd be fine there. His problem is that he's underqualified at this point in his career to be a cleanup hitter. He can't be your best hitter. He can't probably be a top 3 hitter in your lineup, but if he's 4th or 5th in your lineup in terms of like the best hitters, I think he'd be fine. I think this type of a return from a national analyst speaks to his value that people still believe him to have on the open market.
I don't disagree with you at all. Like, I think we're lowering the expectations for how bad it's been. But from the outside, you hear Nolan Arenado, and still you think elite defense at third base and still a really good bat that can help. He's just not a number 1 guy to lead the team, which is why the Phillies, the Red Sox, the Dodgers are all the teams, the Padres that keep popping up. The problem, though, for other teams is you're also paying that guy who's lower in the batting order, and he's good defensively, but the offense is there. You're paying that guy $37 million next year, unless the Cardinals eat some of that.
It's not 37. I think it's 32.
Oh, is it 32?
Okay. Money is in, and there is $5 million coming in that from Colorado. I think it's already been paid. His contract is unbelievably
and that's the kinks that have to get worked out.
But in this scenario, let's say the Cardinals are paying an extra 5, right? So the Phillies are on the hook for 22. Well, Bregman's going to make a hell of a lot more than that. Matt Chapman with the Giants just got $25 million on a 5-year contract. This is a totally reasonable contract for Nolan Arenado if you're not paying the full freight. And in this scenario, he's got the Cardinals sending a little bit of money. So my guess is like $5 million a year probably. Couple years in your winning window if you're the Phillies. This makes a ton of sense if you're them, man. I still think it's crazy that they're moving on from Alec Bohm. That's the part that I don't understand. But once you get past that, the idea of having Nolan Arenado as your third baseman in Philadelphia for a Dave Dombrowski-led team makes all the sense in the world.
And that's a hell of a lot of pieces going in that trade, too, if you're Philadelphia. For Arenado, who essentially the Cardinals are trying to get rid of, and Helsley, of course, raises that.
And that's the kind of thing that
But does he raise it enough for that many top prospects?
I don't think so. I think this is a little overweight. I don't think the Cardinal, like maybe they get 2 of those 3 prospects in a deal. Instead of getting the third, maybe they get like a lottery ticket flyer as the third guy in a deal like this.
They probably get 1 top-end prospect.
Yeah. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I will be curious to see, like, are the Cardinals going to be targeting somebody that is really close to the big leagues, already at the big league level, or far away from the big league level? That's something else that will be noteworthy as we go through this offseason is what they're looking for in return, whether it's Arenado, Helsley, etc. But I think packaging Arenado and Helsley, given what the list of teams are that are going to be interested in Arenado, kind of makes some sense because you can maximize the return for both in that scenario.
Yeah, and I would be exploring that heavily. That's the creativity that we've talked about in the past that this team lacks. And although I'd like to do that package for Alec Bohm instead of those prospects, it goes in the line of what the Cardinals are thinking of redeveloping their minor leagues and bringing certain guys in that can compete for different spots throughout the next couple of spring trainings. This might be the way you have to go about it if you're going to trade Helsley and going to trade Arenado. And if I could package them together and get at least 1 top prospect from a team, to me, that's a win. Because I don't think I was getting a top 100 or a top prospect for Helsley, and I wasn't going to get one for Nolan Arenado. But if I could get one for both of them combined, that's going to be worth it if I'm the Cardinals.
With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. You can check us out on YouTube as well, youtube.com/101ESPN STL. Coming up next, we're going to hit the rewind, put a bow on this thing as we talk about Jim Montgomery's debut behind the bench with the St. Louis Blues. Went pretty damn well. What were our biggest takeaways from that? We'll tell you next year on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario back with you to talk about my friends over at Classic Air Care. If you're in the market to update your HVAC system, then now is the time to do it. And Classic Air Care is highly encouraging you to check this out because on January 1st, the EPA mandating new systems that are manufacturing new refrigerant. And in that industry, it's going to raise the price of those new HVAC systems. And you're probably thinking, HVAC systems are always expensive, Alex. Yeah, but if they get more expensive, then that becomes a lot more difficult for you to upgrade that old unit. So now's the time to do it before the start of the year. Classic Air Care can get out there and in a matter of a weekend have you feeling comfortable with that new HVAC system. Plus, there's financing available to you with Classic Air Care to help those payments around the holiday season. But look, more importantly, you get incredible customer service with the maintenance agreement over at Classic Air Care, knowledgeable technicians that are always able to help you. That's the company that has been making people comfortable since 1926. Call them today or you can schedule that new HVAC system evaluation online. Just tell them Alex Ferrario sent you at Classic Air Care and ClassicAirCare.com.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. If you missed anything from today's show, be sure to check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Center.
Alex, there's really no other way to put it. Last night was a tremendous game for the St. Louis Blues. A 5-2 victory on the road at the New York Rangers. Now, it was a depleted Rangers team. They didn't have Kreider in the lineup last night. They are not a team that is playing at their best right now. They've lost 3 straight, and they're looking for ways to shake things up. It's crazy. They're 12-7-1, have lost 3 straight. So they started the year 12-4-1, and they're like, got to shake things up. But that's where they're at.
Welcome to hockey.
Alex, what was the thing that stood out to you the most last night in Jim Montgomery's debut behind the bench for the Blues?
Mine was his bench management. Like, line combinations are one thing. What he's throwing out there, sure. But the way he handled that game with his roster, I thought was really impressive. One, Zack Bolduc playing the second most minutes that he has ever played in the NHL last night. That was a coach that saw a player playing well and said, keep going. And that player was rewarding his coach with 7 shots on goal and 2 goals. That line was their best line in terms of Corsi rating and high danger scoring chances between Holloway, Sundqvist, and Bolduc. But it was just the little things on the bench. After Kyrou scores, Montgomery is talking to him and they're both laughing. When Bolduc takes a penalty, he's on the bench after that penalty, and Montgomery's talking to him, explaining to him how to handle that same situation the next time. And it's just the positivity it felt like he was providing to that bench. There was a lot of guys that just felt lighter. Holloway said it post-game, it's just a guy that understands the grind of a hockey game and the grind of a hockey season, and he knew how to manage that situational. Now, look, you were winning in that spot. It was a 5-2 victory. Of course, everything feels well. What's that look like when you're losing? Yeah. But, man, when you're managing a bench like that to where you've had a lot of guys that were underperforming this season, that was the thing that I noticed.
Yeah, it felt that way watching, and afterwards to hear multiple players, unprompted, say something about having fun. That felt noteworthy to me, man.
Especially after Bucci's comments on Saturday.
I don't think this team was having a lot of fun. Now, that happens when you lose, right? We talked about this with the Cardinals. Like, people will say, they play with no energy. Yeah, well, they're not hitting. And when you don't hit, you don't have a whole lot of energy because it's not very fun to play a defensive-oriented 3-1 baseball game. And in the NHL, it's the same thing. You know why they looked like they were having fun last night? They scored 5 bleeping goals.
That is fun.
They put 40-plus shots on net. Some of that's by design, though. Some of that is, it sounds like they had a better plan offensively last night. And that does come back to coaching. Now, I will be curious to see what this looks like in 2 weeks, in 2 months, in 2 years under Jim Montgomery. Does it continue to look this way? I don't know. I don't know how anybody can give you an honest assessment of that and tell you definitively one way or the other. Who knows? But for at least one night, and I think probably for the next week or two, you're going to see a energized hockey team, and hopefully they're able to rack up points while they're riding this wave, because if you do, man, you're going to get right back into the playoff mix, and then you force Army's hand where it's like, hey, you gave us this boost, this jolt of energy, do it again. Bring somebody in that can help us ride this wave of momentum into the postseason. It's there for the taking because the Western Conference did not run away from the Blues while they were in the midst of those struggles. They're right now in 5th place in their division, and they're only 3 points back of the Colorado Avalanche, guys. They're not out of this thing.
Oh, and Colorado, I mean, they had to pull their goaltender last night and then pull the goaltender that went in for their pulled goaltender. That's how bad things are right now for Colorado. So it is yours for the taking still. And here's at least here's a checkpoint for me of where it's like, okay, this is different and it's not just a coaching bump. This team has yet to win 3 consecutive games this season. Wow. They've had 3 opportunities and they've failed every single time. Now, who knows what happens tomorrow? It's the New Jersey Devils. It's the best team in their division.
Got a good coach.
But they do got a good coach. I'd say second best coach that was available in the offseason. If you get to that checkpoint.
You're including Montgomery, I'm assuming, right?
Oh, I thought it was Bannister. What's the guy?
Yeah, that yes to both of you.
Oh.
The checkpoint is a 3-game win streak for the Blues. You get to that, then it feels like, okay, this isn't just a coaching bump. This is something that you've pushed forward a little bit more.
It is worth noting the Blues probably wouldn't have Montgomery right now if they had hired
Sheldon Keefe.
I
mean,
so it all ended up working out okay for the Blues.
Sheldon Keefe's got the best record right now in the Eastern Conference, so it must not be a bad coach like everyone was telling me. You remember when Ferrario brought up Sheldon Keefe, and then there was like multiple people that said, Sheldon Keefe?
Hey, T-Bone. Tone.
Yeah, Kadarius. I'm over here podcasting, which means I'm half listening. Major tone that
Did I Kadarius that one up?
Yeah,
A little bit.
I'm sorry,
All
someone.
He's Alex. That's T-Bone. I'm BK. Coming up tomorrow, we will have Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues. We'll have Mike McKenna for his typical Friday spot. He's going to join us on Wednesday. We're off on Thursday and Friday this week for the holiday. We'll have Dan Rosen of NHL.com. We're going to talk to him about some of the trade rumors that have involved the Blues as well. Plus, we will give you our football pick'em. A ton to do tomorrow. So little time to do it.
No prep for us.
So we'll talk to you guys tomorrow starting at 11 a.m. Coming up next is the Fast Lane here on 101 ESPN.
I'm not going to sing it, but it is the holiday season. You know why I know that? Because Ted Drew's, they've got those Christmas trees coming. November 29th, Friday, Ted Drew's Christmas trees will officially be there. That lot is open off of Chippewa. They've got a wide selection of fragrant firs, pine trees available, large trees standing over 8 feet, and, of course, you look for those exclusive Dottie trees that they have that are named in honor of Ted's wife. Always go out to Ted Drew's and enjoy the holiday season, the tradition of walking around, checking out those trees, getting some Ted Drew's famous frozen custard, and it's also very important to buy it by the quart. Take it home, freeze it, have it for all of your holidays. They've got a limited time offer, though, that's only there until December 30th. You buy 3 quarts and get a jumbo container of toppings for free. So get on out to Ted Drew's famous frozen custard. Check out the gift shop as well when you walk across the parking lot. Don't wait any longer. This Friday, start that family tradition. Make Ted Drew's a part of it this holiday season. Ted Drew's famous frozen custard, it really is good, guys and gals.